The story of the nervous system begins quietly, deep within the intricate folds of the human body. Every heartbeat, every breath drawn, and every subtle thought drifting through the mind is guided by a vast, shimmering network of living wires known as neurons. These tiny cells form the foundation of all sensation, motion, and awareness. Without them, the world would remain unseen, unheard, untouched, and unfelt. The nervous system is, in essence, the silent architect of experience, a biological web so intricate that even the simplest movement of a finger requires thousands of signals to pass from one cell to another in perfect synchrony. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing in a quiet forest. The air is still, the trees sway softly, and a faint sound, perhaps the rustle of a small animal, reaches your ears. Before you even become aware of the sound, your nervous system has already been at work. Microscopic sensory neurons in your ears detect tiny vibrations in the air. They transform these movements into electrical impulses, carrying them inward toward the brain. There, deep within the folds of tissue, other neurons receive the signal, interpret it, and gently awaken the mind's awareness. The realization that you have heard something. All of this happens in less than a fraction of a second, faster than the blink of an eye. The nervous system can be thought of as the body's grand communication network. It gathers information from the environment through specialized sensory receptors, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, and then translates these sensations into electrical messages. These signals are carried through fine, thread-like fibers that connect every part of the body to the brain and spinal cord. Once there, the brain processes the incoming data. This constant conversation between the body and the brain forms the rhythm of life, a ceaseless exchange of electrical whispers that continues even as we sleep. At the heart of this system lies the neuron, a cell unlike any other in the body. While most cells simply divide, repair, and sustain tissues, neurons are specialists in communication. They are designed to carry messages, not by physical contact, but through a delicate dance of electricity and chemistry. These cells can be found everywhere in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves that thread through muscles and organs, and together they number in the hundreds of billions. Each neuron is a single voice in a vast and coordinated chorus. The nervous system is divided into two main branches: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, often called the body's command center, consists of the brain and spinal cord. It interprets signals, stores memories, and generates decisions. The peripheral nervous system extends outward from this center like an immense web of filaments, connecting every organ, muscle, and skin cell to the brain's controlling influence. The two systems work as one, constantly sending messages back and forth to ensure that the body maintains its delicate balance. Within this balance lies the subtle concept of homeostasis, the body's ability to keep internal conditions steady despite changes in the outside world. The nervous system is deeply involved in this regulation. If the body becomes too warm, signals from temperature-sensitive neurons trigger the sweat glands to cool it down. If blood pressure drops, nerves instruct the heart to beat faster. Every moment, countless neural commands flow through the body to maintain this stable internal harmony. Even the gentle rhythm of breathing, so effortless that we rarely notice it, is governed by neural circuits quietly measuring oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, adjusting the pace as needed. What makes neurons truly remarkable is their speed. Along their slender fibers at speeds reaching more than 100 meters per second. This swift communication allows the brain to coordinate actions and responses almost instantly. When you touch a hot surface, the signal travels up through sensory neurons to the spinal cord, which, without waiting for the brain's instruction, sends a reflex command straight back to your muscles, making your hand pull away in an instant. Only a moment later does the brain catch up, registering the sensation of heat and the slight sting that follows. Yet for all their precision, neurons are fragile. They depend on a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients delivered by the bloodstream, and unlike most other cells, they do not readily regenerate when damaged. To protect them, the body has developed several layers of defense. The brain is encased within the skull, cushioned by fluid, and shielded by the blood-brain barrier, a microscopic filter that carefully controls which substances may enter from the bloodstream. The spinal cord is similarly guarded by vertebrae and membranes. These protections preserve the nervous system's integrity, for it is the keeper of every thought, memory, and emotion. From an evolutionary perspective, the development of neurons marked a turning point in the history of life. Early organisms were simple, reacting only to direct physical contact or chemical gradients in their environment. But as life became more complex, the need for rapid and coordinated responses grew. The first primitive nerve cells emerged hundreds of millions of years ago, allowing organisms to sense and respond more efficiently. Over time, these cells clustered into networks, forming nerve cords and eventually centralized brains. Today, the human brain, an organ of remarkable complexity, contains billions of neurons, connected by trillions of synapses, each one capable of altering the flow of information in subtle and adaptive ways. Despite their complexity, neurons communicate in a surprisingly elegant manner. Each signal begins as an electrical pulse, generated by a tiny shift in charged particles across the cell membrane. These charges, known as ions, move in carefully regulated patterns that create voltage differences, similar to the flow of current in a circuit. This electrical signal travels along the neuron's length until it reaches the end, where it triggers the release of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. These molecules drift across a microscopic gap called the synapse to bind with the next neuron, continuing the message. Through this combination of electrical speed and chemical precision, neurons weave together every sensation, thought, and action that defines life. The beauty of this system lies not only in its efficiency but also in its adaptability. The connections between neurons are not fixed. They strengthen or weaken depending on how frequently they are used. When you learn something new, the structure of your brain subtly changes. Pathways that carry frequently used signals become more efficient, forming what scientists call neuroplasticity. This ability to reshape and refine connections ensures that the brain remains flexible, capable of growth, and able to recover from injury or adapt to new experiences. In its quiet way, the nervous system does more than manage the body it creates. Our sense of self. Every perception, memory, and emotion arises from the interplay of countless neurons firing in gentle synchrony. When you recall a familiar song or the scent of rain, when you feel calm or inspired, those experiences exist as patterns of electrical activity. The neurons involved may fire together again and again, reinforcing the memory or emotion, deepening the pathway with each repetition. It is through this continuous flow of energy that consciousness itself seems to emerge, like a soft light illuminating the mind from within. There is no sound to a neuron's firing, no visible spark, no movement we can see with the naked eye. Beneath the stillness of a resting body, beneath the quiet of sleep, billions of signals continue to pulse and travel. The body dreams, the heart beats, and the lungs fill with air, all guided by neurons carrying their endless messages. It is this unbroken continuity, this steady hum of life, that keeps us connected to the world both within and beyond ourselves. As the lecture continues, we will journey deeper into the structure and function of these remarkable cells, exploring how their parts work in harmony, how signals move through them, and how they communicate across the vast landscape of the nervous system. For now, as you rest and listen, it may be enough simply to know that within you lies an entire universe of living connections, quiet, ceaseless, and alive with the gentle rhythm of thought itself. 2. The architecture of the neuron. If one were to look closely, enough inside the living brain, deep beneath the folds of gray matter and glistening tissue, a remarkable pattern would come into view, an endless forest of cells, each branching and stretching outward like trees made of light. These are the neurons, the fundamental building blocks of the nervous system. Their forms are as varied as the stars in a night sky. Yet every one shares the same essential plan. Each neuron is a single cell, alive and aware in its own quiet way, devoted entirely to the task of transmitting information. Their anatomy, though small beyond imagining, is both intricate and beautiful, a structure so elegantly designed that it captures the very essence of how communication occurs within the body. At the core of every neuron lies the soma, also known as the cell body. It is the neuron's center of life, containing the nucleus that holds the genetic instructions for all of its functions. Within the soma, countless chemical reactions take place at every moment. It is here that proteins are made, energy is produced, and the essential machinery of the cell is maintained. In appearance, the soma is often round or oval, like a tiny glowing pearl amidst a sea of fibers. It serves as the neuron's command center, interpreting incoming messages and deciding whether to send them onward. The delicate balance between excitation and inhibition, between silence and signal, begins in this small yet powerful structure. Extending outward from the soma are the dendrites, thin branching projections that resemble the limbs of a tree. These are the neuron's receiving antennas, designed to collect information from other cells. A single neuron may have thousands of dendrites, each forming a connection, or synapse, with another neuron. The dendrites gather these inputs and funnel them toward the soma, where the information is combined and processed. Through this branching network, the neuron listens, constantly absorbing signals, comparing them, integrating their meanings. The strength and pattern of these connections determine much of how we perceive and respond to the world. Each time a new memory is formed or a skill is learned, it is often the dendrites that grow new branches or strengthen their links, subtly reshaping the architecture of the brain. From the soma emerges another structure, the axon, a long, slender fiber that carries signals away from the neuron. If the dendrites are the neuron's ears, the axon is its voice. In some neurons, this single extension can be extremely short. In others, particularly those that control movement or transmit sensory information, the axon can stretch astonishing distances. The neurons that run from the spinal cord to the toes, for instance. Along this narrow thread, electrical impulses travel in a wave of activity known as the action potential, carrying the neuron's message from one end to the other with extraordinary speed. At the point where the axon leaves the soma, there is a small region called the axon hillock. This area plays a critical role in deciding whether the neuron will fire an impulse. It is here that all the incoming signals from the dendrites are summed together, a mathematical balancing act between excitation and inhibition. If the combined signals reach a certain threshold, the axon hillock springs into action, initiating an electrical current that races down the axon. If not, the neuron remains quiet, waiting for stronger or more persistent input. This delicate threshold mechanism ensures that neurons communicate efficiently and precisely, firing only when the signal is strong enough to warrant it. Along the length of the axon lies another remarkable feature, the myelin sheath. This sheath is a layer of fatty insulation that wraps around the axon like a protective coat. It is formed by specialized cells known as glial cells, which play a vital supporting role in the nervous system. In the brain and spinal cord, these cells are called oligodendrocytes, while in the peripheral nerves, they are known as Schwann cells. The myelin sheath is not continuous. Instead, it forms a series of segments, separated by small gaps known as the nodes of Ranvier. These gaps are critical for the rapid transmission of electrical impulses. As the action potential travels along the axon, it appears to leap from node to node in a process called saltatory conduction, greatly increasing the speed of communication. The importance of myelin becomes evident when it is damaged. In conditions such as multiple sclerosis, the loss of myelin causes nerve impulses to slow down or fail entirely, leading to weakness, numbness, and impaired coordination. This vulnerability underscores the precision of the neuron's architecture. Every part, no matter how small, serves a vital purpose in maintaining the harmony of communication. At the far end of the axon lies the axon terminal, a collection of fine branches that form connections with other cells. Each terminal ends in a bulb-like structure known as a synaptic bouton, where electrical signals are converted into chemical ones. When an impulse reaches the terminal, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters, the molecules that carry messages across the small gap between neurons, called the synapse. These neurotransmitters bind to receptors on the next cell, allowing the signal to continue its journey. The axon terminal thus serves as a bridge, transforming fleeting electrical energy into a chemical whisper that can be heard by another neuron, a muscle fiber, or a gland cell. Together, the soma, dendrites, and axon form a system of extraordinary coordination. The soma maintains the neuron's health, the dendrites receive information, and the axon delivers it onward. This elegant design is both simple and adaptable, allowing for immense variety across the nervous system. Some neurons are tiny, connecting only with nearby cells. Others span great distances, linking brain to muscle or sense organ to spinal cord. Some are shaped like stars, others like pyramids or spirals, each adapted perfectly for its role. Despite these differences, they all share the same underlying principle: the conversion of electrical energy into communication. Surrounding this core architecture is an entire network of support. Glial cells, though often overshadowed by neurons, are equally essential. They provide structure, nourishment, and protection. Astrocytes, a type of glial cell, help regulate the chemical environment around neurons and form part of the blood-brain barrier. Microglia act as the brain's immune defenders, removing waste and guarding against infection. Oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells, as mentioned, produce myelin to insulate axons. This supporting cast ensures that neurons can do their delicate work without interruption, maintaining the purity of the electrical signals that define thought and movement. When seen under a microscope, neurons reveal a breathtaking complexity. Their branching forms intertwine like vines in a garden, creating a dense network of connections known as the neural web. Each neuron may connect with thousands of others, and each of those with thousands more, forming a system of unimaginable scale. The human brain alone contains roughly 86 billion neurons, linked by more than 100 trillion synapses. Every movement of thought, every flicker of memory, every act of awareness is the product of this immense interconnected structure. It is not a static web, but a living, changing one. Connections strengthen and fade depending on use, creating the shifting patterns of learning and memory that shape who we are. Even at rest, they maintain a steady electrical potential, a balance of ions across their membranes that prepares them to act at any moment. This resting state is like the poised stillness of a musician before the first note of a song. When a stimulus arrives, a sound, a touch, a thought, the pattern changes, and the neuron fires, releasing its energy in a brief, controlled pulse. In this way, the brain remains ready, responsive, and alive to every shift in the environment. To appreciate the architecture of the neuron is to glimpse the foundation of consciousness itself. Each structure, from the branching dendrites to the fine axon terminals, contributes to the seamless flow of information that defines life. The neuron is both a single cell and a living circuit, a unit of structure and a vessel of meaning. Its design is the result of millions of years of refinement, shaped by evolution to carry messages with elegance and efficiency. When countless neurons come together, their combined signals form the electrical symphony that underlies thought, sensation, and movement. As you settle into this understanding, it becomes clear that even the simplest action, a breath drawn, a memory recalled, A word spoken arises from the cooperation of these delicate structures. The neuron's architecture is a reminder that complexity can be born from simplicity, that even the smallest parts of the body carry the grandeur of life's design. And in the quiet moments between thoughts, when the mind drifts toward rest, this intricate network continues its ceaseless work, the gentle pulse of neurons, maintaining the rhythm of being, unseen but ever present, within the vast calm of the human body. 3. The dendrites, receiving the signal. Within the great landscape of the nervous system, the dendrites are its listening branches. They extend outward from the soma like the delicate limbs of an ancient tree, reaching into the surrounding neural forest to gather whispers from other cells. Their name comes from the Greek word dendron, meaning tree, and the resemblance is fitting. Under a microscope, their forms spread in fine fractal patterns, branching again and again until they fill the space around the neuron with a web of slender filaments. Through these extensions, the neuron opens itself to communication, collecting the countless signals that flow through the brain and body. In the quiet elegance of their design lies the secret of how thought begins, not as a single command, but as a chorus of incoming impulses, softly blending together before being passed inward for interpretation. Every dendrite is covered with a thin membrane that contains thousands of specialized protein channels and receptors. These microscopic structures are exquisitely tuned to detect the chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters. When a neighboring neuron releases these molecules into the synaptic cleft, the narrow space between cells, they drift across and bind to receptors on the dendritic surface. Each neurotransmitter fits into its receptor like a key into a lock, triggering a subtle change in the electrical state of the membrane. In this way, dendrites transform chemistry into electricity, converting invisible molecules into measurable signals that travel toward the soma. Unlike wires in a simple circuit, dendrites are dynamic and alive. They constantly change shape, extending new branches or retracting old ones as experiences shape the brain. This ability to remodel themselves is one of the foundations of learning and memory. When two neurons communicate frequently, the connection between them grows stronger. The dendritic spine's tiny protrusions that cover the branches enlarge, multiply, and become more sensitive to incoming signals. When connections go unused, the spines may shrink or disappear, allowing the neuron to redirect its attention to more active pathways. This ongoing dance of growth and withdrawal. In the early stages of development, a young neuron sprouts many dendritic branches in all directions, exploring the surrounding space. These early structures are somewhat chaotic, like the first shoots of a plant. Over time, as the neuron begins to receive input from its neighbors, the dendrites refine their shape, strengthening some branches and pruning others. This process, called dendritic pruning, ensures that each neuron forms efficient and purposeful connections. By adulthood, the pattern of dendrites has become as unique as a fingerprint, reflecting a lifetime of sensory experiences, thoughts, and emotions. When viewed functionally, dendrites are more than just passive receivers. They play an active role in shaping how information is processed. Each branch operates almost like a miniature computing unit, capable of integrating signals and generating local electrical changes. These local events, called graded potentials, combine as they move toward the soma. If enough excitatory signals arrive close together in time and space, they can cause the neuron to fire an action potential, sending a message down the axon. Inhibitory signals, by contrast, reduce the likelihood of firing, maintaining balance within the network. The result is a delicate arithmetic performed continuously within every neuron, a calculation that determines whether to speak or to remain silent. The signals that reach the dendrites vary widely in type and strength. Some arrive from sensory neurons, carrying information from the outside world, light striking the retina, sound waves vibrating in the ear, or pressure on the skin. Others come from interneurons deep within the brain, encoding memories, emotions, or expectations. The dendrites do not distinguish the origin of these signals. They simply collect and sum them. In this way, the neuron becomes a meeting place for countless influences, a convergence of the body's sensory world and the mind's internal landscape. At the microscopic level, dendrites are covered with countless small protrusions called dendritic spines. Each spine forms a single synapse, with an axon terminal from another neuron. Though tiny, often less than a micron in length, these spines are powerfully significant. They increase the surface area available for connections, allowing a single neuron to receive input from thousands of others. They also compartmentalize chemical and electrical activity, keeping signals localized and distinct. This isolation is what allows neurons to perform complex computations, distinguishing one pattern of input from another. The continual reshaping of these spines, guided by activity and experience, underlies much of what we call learning. The electrical changes within dendrites are subtle and transient. They are governed by the movement of ions, charged particles, such as sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride across the membrane. When neurotransmitters bind to their receptors, they cause ion channels to open, allowing these particles to flow in or out of the cell. The result is a shift in voltage across the membrane, a phenomenon known as depolarization or hyperpolarization depending on the direction of change. Excitatory inputs depolarize the membrane, bringing it closer to the threshold for firing. Inhibitory inputs hyperpolarize it, pushing it further away. The dendrites, with their branching complexity, integrate these changes in a continuous and fluid process. It is a symphony of microscopic currents, rising and falling in harmony, until a clear signal emerges. The structure of dendrites varies dramatically depending on the type of neuron and its role in the nervous system. In the cerebral cortex, pyramidal neurons display long, tapering dendrites that fan outward in elegant patterns, allowing them to receive input from multiple layers of the brain. In the cerebellum, Purkinje cells boast some of the most elaborate dendritic trees known, with thousands of finely spaced branches arranged in a single plane, forming what looks like a lacework of silver threads. In contrast, sensory neurons often have simpler structures, optimized for speed rather than complexity. Each form is a reflection of function, a physical manifestation of how that neuron participates in the larger network. What makes the dendritic system so remarkable is its sensitivity. These structures can respond to changes in electrical activity, biochemical signals, and even the presence of growth factors in the surrounding environment. When the brain is learning something new, a piece of music, a language, a movement, specific patterns of activity encourage certain dendrites to grow stronger. Calcium ions entering through active synapses can trigger cascades of molecular signals that alter gene expression within the soma. Over hours and days, these chemical messages translate into physical changes. New spines form, membranes thicken, and synaptic strength increases. Learning, in this sense, maintaining balance within the brain. Too much excitation can lead to instability or even seizures, while too much inhibition can result in sluggishness and lack of response. Dendritic mechanisms help regulate this equilibrium through feedback loops that adjust the sensitivity of receptors and the number of active synapses. It is a continuous process of fine-tuning, ensuring that the neuron remains responsive yet stable, active yet controlled. As night falls and the body begins to rest, dendrites continue their quiet labor. During sleep, particularly in deep and dream stages, they reorganize and strengthen important connections while trimming away the less necessary ones. This process, sometimes described as neural housekeeping, ensures that the brain remains efficient. Experiences gathered during the day are reviewed and consolidated. Irrelevant or redundant signals fade away. In the morning, the dendritic network awakens refreshed, refined, and ready to learn again. To imagine the dendrites at work is to picture an ocean of living branches, each one shimmering with the faint glow of electrical activity. They reach toward one another, touch, and communicate, passing signals that will become thoughts, memories, sensations, and dreams. They embody the essence of connection not just between neurons but between experiences, moments. In their constant activity lies the foundation of awareness, the ceaseless flow of information that binds body and mind together. In the end, the dendrites remind us that even the smallest part of the nervous system is an instrument of astonishing grace. They do not command or control. They listen, interpret, and respond. Their purpose is to receive and to understand. Each spark that dances along their branches contributes to the vast symphony of neural life, a harmony that never truly ceases. As we drift toward rest, the dendrites continue to listen to the quiet rhythm of our breath, to the steady pulse of the heart, to the endless conversation that sustains the living mind. 4. The soma, the quiet center. At the heart of every neuron lies a still and luminous space, the soma, also known as the cell body. If the dendrites are the many arms that reach outward to listen, the soma is the quiet center that gathers their messages, interprets their meaning, and maintains the health of the entire cell. Within its rounded walls, life is sustained by countless microscopic processes, all operating in perfect coordination. The soma is both sanctuary and engine, a place where the neuron's identity is preserved and its strength continually renewed. Every thought, every movement, and every sensation that ripples through the nervous system passes, in some way, through the silent work of the soma. The soma's form is simple, yet purposeful. It typically appears as a rounded or oval body, a few micrometers across, suspended in the gentle translucence of the nervous tissue. But within that small space lies a world of constant motion. The cytoplasm, a soft, jelly-like substance, fills the soma and provides the environment for all cellular functions. Floating within it are the organelles, specialized structures that perform distinct roles, much like workers in a vast, quiet factory. The most prominent among them is the nucleus, the repository of the neuron's genetic code. The nucleus houses DNA, coiled into delicate strands of chromatin, carrying the instructions that dictate every detail of the neuron's structure and behavior. Surrounding the nucleus is a double membrane, punctuated by tiny pores that regulate the passage of molecules in and out, maintaining both protection and communication. Here, deep within the nucleus, lies the neuron's sense of continuity. It's linked to the generations of cells that came before. When the neuron synthesizes proteins, the process begins with the genetic information stored in DNA being transcribed into a molecule called messenger RNA. This RNA leaves the nucleus and travels through the cytoplasm to the ribosomes, which are the cell's molecular workshops. Some ribosomes float freely, while others cling to the surface of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, a network of membranes that weaves throughout the soma like a soft inner skeleton. It is here that the raw materials of life, the enzymes, receptors, and structural proteins are crafted. These molecules will later be transported through the neuron to wherever they are needed, whether that be the tips of the dendrites, the length of the axon. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum, less densely covered with ribosomes, plays a different role. It regulates calcium levels within the cell and helps produce lipids, including components of the membranes that encase the neuron. The Golgi apparatus, another essential organelle, acts as the soma's post office, packaging proteins and other molecules into small vesicles for delivery to their destinations. These vesicles move along the neuron's internal scaffolding, a network of microtubules and filaments that extend throughout the cytoplasm. This cytoskeleton not only supports the soma's shape but also serves as a railway system, guiding the transport of materials to distant parts of the neuron. The continuous movement of these molecular cargoes is vital. Without it, the neuron's far-reaching extensions would wither and fail. Energy, the invisible currency of life, is generated within the mitochondria, small, oval-shaped organelles that dot the soma in abundance. Each mitochondrion converts nutrients such as glucose into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, the energy molecule that powers nearly every cellular function. The brain, though only a fraction of the body's mass, consumes about 20% of its total energy supply, and much of that demand is met by the tireless activity of these mitochondria. They keep the neurons' ion pumps running, maintain the electrical gradients that allow impulses to travel. The rhythm of their work is steady and essential, a quiet pulse beneath the greater hum of neural activity. The soma is more than a collection of organelles. It is a center of decision-making. As the dendrites deliver their countless signals, the soma integrates them, adding and subtracting the excitatory and inhibitory inputs until a single conclusion emerges, whether the neuron should fire or remain at rest. This process is called summation. It is a subtle computation, performed without consciousness, yet it represents one of the fundamental mechanisms of thought. When the combined input exceeds a specific threshold, the soma initiates an electrical impulse that travels down the axon, carrying the neuron's message forward. If the input falls short, the neuron remains silent, preserving its energy for the next moment of significance. Even as it manages these complex interactions, the soma must also ensure its own survival. Neurons, unlike many other cells, rarely divide. Once formed, they are expected to endure for a lifetime. To achieve such longevity, the soma must constantly repair and renew itself. Damaged proteins are broken down by lysosomes, small vesicles filled with enzymes that act as the neuron's cleanup crew. Waste products are processed and recycled. The balance of ions and molecules within the cytoplasm is carefully regulated, preventing the buildup of substances that could disrupt function. Every second, the soma performs millions of such adjustments, maintaining a delicate equilibrium that allows the neuron to persist, alert and ready, for decades. The soma also communicates with other parts of the neuron through biochemical signals. When the axon terminal releases neurotransmitters, feedback messages can travel back to the soma, altering gene expression or metabolic activity. This two-way communication ensures that the neuron adapts to changing conditions. If a particular pathway is used often, the soma may respond by producing more receptors or neurotransmitter molecules to strengthen that connection. If a pathway falls silent, the soma may reduce its support, allowing the connection to fade. Through these mechanisms, the soma plays a central role in learning, memory, and adaptation, reshaping the neuron's structure to match experience. The quiet activity within the soma mirrors the stillness found in nature's centers, the calm heart of a storm, the deep of the ocean, the roots of a forest tree. It is not a place of chaos, but of balance. Around it, electrical signals flash and fade, chemicals surge and ebb. Yet within the soma, there is order, continuity, and calm. The flow of molecules follows pathways laid down through millions of years of evolution, pathways that ensure the neuron remains both stable and responsive. This stillness is not emptiness. It is the poised energy of a living system at rest, prepared to act at any instant. Even in the vast complexity of the human brain, where billions of neurons communicate at once, each soma performs this same ancient work. It listens to the language of ions, reads the code of DNA, and sustains the life of its cell. It is a reminder that intelligence does not arise solely from motion or noise, but from the quiet balance of structure and purpose. Every thought, every memory, every dream begins here, in the silent core of the soma, where chemistry and electricity meet in perfect harmony. If we could observe the soma through the gentle lens of imagination, it might resemble a glowing sphere suspended in darkness, pulsing softly with the rhythm of life. Around it, the dendrites branch outward, gathering light. From it, the axon extends, carrying energy into the unknown. The soma holds the center, the bridge between the receptive and the expressive, between the listener and the speaker. In its stillness lies control. In its stability lies motion. As the body rests, the soma continues its tireless labor, maintaining balance, processing signals, and renewing its strength. It is a constant presence, unhurried and enduring, anchoring the neuron amid the restless tide of activity that defines the nervous system. The soma's quiet persistence is, in a sense, a reflection of life itself, steady, fragile, and infinitely complex. In its silence, it reminds us that beneath every act of thought or perception lies a calm center, working faithfully, unseen, to sustain the brilliance of the mind. 5. The axon, the long pathway of communication, stretching away from the soma like a single, slender thread. The axon is the neuron's path outward into the vast landscape of the nervous system, where the dendrites serve as the receptive arms of the cell, gathering messages from the world around them. The axon carries those messages onward, transforming the neuron's quiet decisions into motion, sensation, and response. It is the voice of the neuron, a conduit through which thought becomes action. Though impossibly thin, often only a few micrometers in diameter, the axon can reach astonishing lengths, extending from the spinal cord down to the toes in the human body. This delicate fiber forms one of nature's most efficient communication lines, capable of transmitting information at remarkable speeds with unerring precision. Each axon begins at the axon hillock, a small, cone-shaped region that joins the soma to the fiber's slender body. Here, the neuron makes its pivotal choice, whether to fire or remain silent. When enough signals arrive from the dendrites and are integrated in the soma, the electrical potential at the axon hillock reaches a critical threshold. In that instant, a brief, powerful electrical pulse bursts into being, known as an action potential. It is the neuron's signal, its message to the world beyond itself. Once triggered, this electrical event travels down the axon's length like a wave, self-sustaining and irreversible, carrying the neuron's voice through the labyrinth of neural pathways. To understand how this signal moves, one must imagine the axon not as a wire, but as a living membrane, lined with gates that open and close in precise sequence. These gates are protein channels that allow ions, charged particles such as sodium and potassium, to flow in and out of the cell. When the neuron is at rest, the inside of the axon carries a slight negative charge compared to the outside. This difference in electrical potential, called the resting membrane potential, is maintained by ion pumps that work tirelessly to move particles against their natural gradients. But when the neuron fires, the gates open in rapid succession. Sodium ions rush inward, reversing the charge momentarily, and this change propagates along the axon in a wave of depolarization. Behind the wave, potassium ions flow outward, restoring the original balance and preparing the axon for the next signal. The entire process lasts only a few thousandths of a second, yet it represents one of biology's most elegant and efficient forms of communication. The speed at which this signal travels depends largely on the axon's structure. In many neurons, the axon is wrapped in a protective covering called the myelin sheath. This sheath, composed of fatty layers formed by specialized glial cells, insulates the axon and prevents electrical current from leaking out. Instead of flowing smoothly along the entire membrane, the signal jumps from one exposed segment to the next small gaps called the nodes of Ranvier. This pattern of movement, known as saltatory conduction, allows impulses to travel far faster than they would through an unmyelinated fiber. The name comes from the Latin saltare, meaning to leap, and indeed, the electrical pulse seems to hop from node to node, covering long distances in an instant. The importance of myelin becomes clear when it is lost. In disorders such as multiple sclerosis, the immune system mistakenly attacks the myelin sheath, disrupting communication between neurons. Signals that once raced along effortlessly now falter or fail altogether, leading to weakness, fatigue, or loss of coordination. The axon itself may remain intact, Yet without its insulating layer, the message cannot complete its journey. It is a reminder of how precisely balanced the nervous system is, and how even the smallest disruption can ripple outward into profound effects. At the end of its long path, the axon divides into many fine branches known as terminal fibers. Each branch ends in a bulb-like swelling called a synaptic terminal or bouton. This is where the electrical world of the neuron meets the chemical world of communication. When an action potential reaches the terminal, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters, the small molecules that carry messages across the synapse, the narrow gap separating one neuron from the next. The arrival of the electrical signal causes tiny sacs called synaptic vesicles to merge with the terminal membrane, spilling their contents into the space between cells. These molecules drift across the gap and bind to receptors on the dendrites of the next neuron, beginning the cycle anew. Thus, the axon serves as both messenger and translator, converting the flow of ions into the chemistry of thought. The efficiency of this process is astonishing. A single neuron may fire hundreds of times per second, sending pulses down its axon to hundreds or even thousands of different targets. Each pulse must be precisely timed, each message delivered without error. The axon's internal structure makes this possible. Running through its length is a complex network of microtubules, hollow filaments that act as both scaffolding and transport routes. These microtubules carry nutrients, enzymes, and vesicles back and forth along the axon, sustaining its function. Because axons can be extremely long, sometimes stretching the entire length of a limb, this internal transport system is vital. It ensures that materials produced in the soma can reach the farthest terminals and that waste products can be carried back for recycling. The smooth movement of these molecular cargoes is guided by motor proteins, tiny machines that walk along the microtubules, pulling their loads with rhythmic precision. In many ways, the axon can be thought of as a living bridge between the inner world of the neuron and the outer network of the nervous system. It carries information outward to other neurons, to muscles, to glands, and thus makes the abstract computations of the brain into tangible actions. Every movement of a muscle, every beat of the heart, every flash of recognition in the mind depends on the silent work of axons. Even sensations such as touch or temperature rely on them, as sensory axons carry signals inward from the skin and organs to the spinal cord and brain. In one direction, the body speaks. In the other, the brain replies. Yet the axon is not merely a conduit for commands. It is also a participant in the neuron's adaptability. When pathways in the brain are used frequently, the axons involved may grow additional branches or strengthen their synaptic terminals. This process, known as axonal sprouting, allows the nervous system to reorganize itself in response to experience. After injury, surviving neurons may extend new axons to replace lost connections, seeking out unoccupied targets and forming new circuits. Though this regenerative ability is limited in the central nervous system, it is more robust in the peripheral nerves, where axons can sometimes regrow several millimeters per day under favorable conditions. If one could slow down time and observe a signal traveling through an axon, it would resemble a wave of energy gliding through a living cable, invisible yet precise. The electrical changes sweep forward smoothly, leaving no trace behind but a brief flicker of voltage. Along the way, ion channels open and close like synchronized dancers, each movement perfectly timed to sustain the pulse. The speed, though measurable in meters per second, feels almost instantaneous, a living current connecting thought to motion. It is through these fleeting waves that the brain holds conversation with the body, composing the music of life, one pulse at a time. In the quiet of the night, when the body lies still and the mind drifts into rest, the axons continue their subtle work. They carry messages that regulate heartbeat and breathing, guide the cycles of sleep, and coordinate the intricate balance of hormones and rhythms that sustain life. Even in dreams, axons remain active, transmitting the signals that give rise to images, sensations, and emotions that seem as real as waking experience. The brain never truly sleeps. Its axons hum with constant energy, weaving the delicate fabric of consciousness through their endless communication. The architecture of the axon reveals a truth about the nervous system itself, that distance is no barrier to unity. Through these slender fibers, every part of the body remains linked to every other. A thought formed in the brain can reach the fingertips in a fraction of a second. A touch upon the skin can echo through the mind almost instantly. The axons are the threads that bind the self together, creating coherence from complexity, harmony from the vast diversity of the body's parts. If one listens closely to the rhythm of life, the steady beat of the heart, the smooth flow of breath, the quiet pulse of awareness, one can almost imagine the axons at work beneath the surface, carrying their electrical songs from cell to cell. They do not speak loudly, yet their voices shape every aspect of experience. In their speed, their precision, and their resilience lies the continuity of the pre-living world. They are the pathways through which the self reaches outward, the long, luminous bridges connecting thought to action, mind to body, and the inner silence to the infinite space beyond. 6. The myelin sheath and nodes of Ranvier. Along the slender length of the axon lies one of nature's most elegant solutions to the challenge of distance, the myelin sheath. It is a soft, glistening layer that wraps itself around the axon in successive coils, forming a protective and insulating covering. To the naked eye, it is invisible, but under a microscope, it appears as a series of shining white rings, giving certain regions of the brain and spinal cord their pale coloration. This material, composed largely of lipids and proteins, is what allows electrical signals to travel with extraordinary speed and precision. Without it, the nervous system would be sluggish and inefficient, unable to coordinate the countless actions required for life. Myelin is, in essence, the quiet guardian of communication, ensuring that every thought, movement, and sensation flows smoothly through the intricate network of neurons. The discovery of myelin in the 19th century offered one of the first glimpses into how the nervous system achieves its remarkable efficiency. Scientists observing nerve fibers under early microscopes noticed that some appeared coated in a fatty substance while others did not. Over time, they came to understand that this coating was not mere padding, but an essential part of neural function. Myelin serves the same purpose as insulation around an electrical wire. It prevents current from leaking out and allows signals to travel farther, faster, and with less energy. In a world measured in millivolts and milliseconds, this efficiency makes all the difference. Myelin is produced by specialized glial cells, a type of support cell that works in partnership with neurons. In the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, myelin is formed by oligodendrocytes. Each oligodendrocyte extends several flat, arm-like projections that wrap around different axons, creating multiple segments of myelin at once. In the peripheral nervous system, which connects the central network to the rest of the body, unlike oligodendrocytes, each Schwann cell produces myelin for a single segment of one axon, enveloping it in layer after layer of its own membrane. Despite these differences, both cell types serve the same fundamental role building and maintaining the sheath that allows nerve impulses to travel at breathtaking speed. The myelin sheath does not form a continuous covering. Instead, it is interrupted at regular intervals by tiny gaps known as the nodes of Ranvier, named after the French histologist Louis-Antoine Ranvier, who first described them in the late 1800s. These nodes are only a few micrometers wide, yet they play a vital role in the transmission of electrical signals. Within these narrow spaces, the axon's membrane is exposed to the surrounding fluid, rich in sodium and potassium ions. Ion channels cluster densely at each node, ready to open and close as the action potential passes. In contrast, the myelinated regions between nodes are largely devoid of such channels, acting instead as insulated segments through which current can flow effortlessly. When an electrical impulse travels along a myelinated axon, it does not move in a continuous wave as it does in an unmyelinated fiber. Instead, the current leaps from node to node in a process called saltatory conduction, from the Latin word saltare, meaning to jump. At each node, the influx of sodium ions regenerates the action potential. This leaping motion allows the impulse to travel up to 100 times faster than it would otherwise. What might take several hundred milliseconds in an unmyelinated fiber can occur in just a few. The result is nearly instantaneous communication, the kind required for reflexes, thought, and movement to occur seamlessly. The myelin sheath also conserves energy. By insulating the axon, it reduces the amount of ion exchange needed to carry a signal. The sodium-potassium pumps, which consume large amounts of energy to maintain the neuron's resting potential, must work only at the nodes rather than along the entire length of the axon. This economy of effort allows neurons to fire repeatedly without exhausting their energy reserves. In the busy circuitry of the brain, where billions of neurons communicate every second, such efficiency is essential. Without it, even the simplest act of movement or perception would demand more energy than the body could provide. Despite its strength and precision, the myelin sheath is delicate and can be damaged by disease, trauma, or metabolic stress. When myelin deteriorates, the electrical signals that depend on it begin to falter. One of the most well-known examples of this is multiple sclerosis, an autoimmune condition in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the myelin in the central nervous system. As the sheath breaks down, exposed sections of axon lose their insulation, causing impulses to slow or fail. The results can be unpredictable muscle weakness, numbness, visual disturbances, or difficulties in coordination. In severe cases, the axons themselves may degenerate, leading to permanent loss of function. Other disorders, such as Guillain-Barré syndrome, affect myelin in the peripheral nerves, causing similar disruptions in communication. Yet the nervous system possesses some capacity for repair. Schwann cells, in particular, can promote regrowth by producing new myelin after injury, guiding axons back to their targets. Ongoing research seeks to harness this regenerative ability to restore damaged myelin in diseases where it is lost. The hope is that, one day, therapies might awaken the body's own capacity to rebuild its neural prize, insulation, restoring the swift harmony of its electrical symphony. The importance of myelin extends beyond speed alone. It influences how neurons connect and communicate. During development, the formation of myelin marks a crucial stage in brain maturation. As children grow, their brains undergo waves of myelination, first in sensory and motor areas, and later in regions associated with reasoning and emotion. This gradual process explains why coordination, impulse control, and complex thought emerge progressively through childhood and adolescence. Even in adulthood, myelin continues to adapt in response to experience and learning. The more a neural pathway is used, the thicker and more refined its myelin becomes, increasing the efficiency of transmission. In this way, myelin is not merely a passive insulator but an active participant in the brain's ability to learn and remember. The nodes of Ranvier, though small, serve as the rhythmic punctuation in this system of communication. They are points of renewal where the signal gathers strength before leaping onward. Their spacing is not random. The distance between nodes is precisely tuned to maximize speed while preserving reliability. If the nodes were too close, conduction would slow. If too far apart, the signal might dissipate. Nature has found the perfect balance, allowing the current to glide effortlessly across great distances. Between these nodes, the myelin sheath acts as a silent highway, guiding the pulse of electricity forward without loss or interference. To imagine the process is to picture a river flowing swiftly over a series of smooth stones. The water touches down briefly at each stone, the nodes, before leaping onward, energized and renewed. The current does not weaken as it travels. Instead, it gathers momentum, reaching its destination with perfect timing. So too does the electrical signal of the neuron, racing along the myelinated axon with grace and precision. In the quiet order of the nervous system, the myelin sheath and its nodes embody the harmony between structure and function. They show how simplicity, alternating layers of insulation and exposure, can produce complexity of behavior and speed. They are a reminder that nature often achieves perfection not through excess but through balance. Each layer placed exactly where it is needed, each gap perfectly measured. As the mind drifts toward rest, myelinated fibers continue to hum softly beneath the surface of awareness. They carry the silent messages that sustain the body's rhythms, the steady beating of the heart, the gentle expansion of the lungs, the subtle adjustments that maintain warmth and balance. Within every nerve, signals leap quietly from node to node, a silent dance of electricity that never ceases. Even in sleep, the myelin sheath continues to protect, insulate, and guide, ensuring that the symphony of life plays on without interruption. When we awaken, it is the same system that allows the first sensations to stir the feel of the morning air, the faint sound of movement, the gentle return of thought. The myelin sheath and the nodes of Ranvier are invisible participants in all of it, their work hidden yet indispensable. They are the unsung architects of speed, the silent keepers of rhythm, the threads of light that connect every neuron in the endless conversation of the living mind. 7. The synapse, where neurons meet. At the end of every neuron's journey lies a narrow space so small that it cannot be seen even under a standard microscope. Yet across this space, the entire story of communication unfolds. This space is called the synapse, and it is here that neurons pass their messages from one to another, not through touch or direct connection, but by a delicate exchange of chemical and electrical energy. The synapse is the meeting point of thought and action, the bridge between one moment and the next. Every sensation, every memory, and every decision that emerges in the mind depends upon the activity that takes place within this microscopic realm. It is a place of continual motion, filled with invisible particles that flow, bind, and release in perfect rhythm, orchestrating the harmony of the nervous system. The word synapse comes from the Greek synapsis, meaning to join together, though in reality, neurons never quite touch. Between them lies a narrow gap known as the synaptic cleft, typically just a few nanometers wide, so small that thousands could fit within the thickness of a human hair. On one side of this cleft sits the axon terminal of the transmitting neuron, known as the presynaptic cell. On the other side waits the receptive surface of the dendrite or soma of the next neuron, called the postsynaptic cell. These two faces, separated by only the smallest distance, form one of the most important interfaces in biology. It is here that the electrical signals of the nervous system are transformed into the chemical language that allows one neuron to influence another. When an electrical impulse or action potential travels down the axon and reaches the terminal, it brings with it a sudden change in voltage that opens tiny channels in the membrane. These channels allow calcium ions from the surrounding fluid to rush into the terminal, triggering a cascade of molecular events. Within the terminal lie hundreds of small, bubble-like structures known as synaptic vesicles. Each vesicle is filled with neurotransmitter molecules, the chemical messengers of the nervous system. The arrival of calcium ions causes some of these vesicles to move toward the membrane, where they fuse with it and release their contents into the synaptic cleft. This process, known as exocytosis, happens in a fraction of a millisecond. And with each electrical pulse, dozens or even hundreds of vesicles may release their cargo. Once released, the neurotransmitters drift across the narrow cleft, carried by diffusion, and bind to specific receptor proteins embedded in the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron. Each receptor is uniquely shaped to recognize a particular neurotransmitter, like a lock designed for a single key. When a neurotransmitter binds, it changes the receptor's shape, opening ion channels or activating chemical pathways inside the cell. These effects can be either excitatory or inhibitory, depending on the type of receptor and neurotransmitter involved. Excitatory signals make it more likely that the postsynaptic neuron will fire its own action potential, while inhibitory signals make it less likely. In this way, the synapse acts as both messenger and regulator, balancing the flow of activity through the neural network. The brain contains trillions of synapses, more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. Each one operates independently, yet together they form an immense, living web of communication. The pattern of synaptic activity at any given moment determines what we see. When we recall a memory, recognize a face, or speak a word, specific combinations of synapses activate in harmony, their chemical exchanges forming the patterns of consciousness. These patterns are not static. They shift from moment to moment, creating the fluid nature of thought. What makes the synapse even more remarkable is its adaptability. With repeated use, the efficiency of a synapse can change. It can become stronger or weaker, depending on how often it is activated. This phenomenon, known as synaptic plasticity, underlies learning and memory. When two neurons communicate frequently, the presynaptic cell releases neurotransmitters more readily, and the postsynaptic cell grows more sensitive to them. Over time, the connection between them strengthens, forming what neuroscientists call a long-term potentiation. This strengthening allows signals to travel more easily along well-used pathways, encoding habits, memories, and skills. Conversely, synapse goes unused. It may weaken, allowing the brain to prune away connections that are no longer needed. Through this constant remodeling, the brain remains flexible and efficient, refining its circuitry in response to experience. There are many types of neurotransmitters, each with its own role in shaping perception and behavior. Glutamate, the most abundant, serves as the primary excitatory transmitter in the brain, driving much of its activity. GABA, or gamma-aminobutyric acid, has the opposite effect, providing inhibition and balance. Dopamine is associated with reward, motivation, and movement. Serotonin influences mood, sleep, and appetite. Acetylcholine is essential for attention and memory. Dozens of others play specialized roles in different regions of the brain and body. The delicate interplay of these chemicals gives rise to the full spectrum of human experience, from alertness to calm, from thought to emotion, from action to rest. Yet the synapse is not merely a chemical interface. It is also an electrical one. In certain parts of the nervous system, neurons are connected by structures called gap junctions, which allow ions to flow directly from one cell to another. These electrical synapses provide faster but less flexible communication, useful for processes that require immediate coordination, such as reflexes or rhythmic movements of the heart and diaphragm. Most synapses, however, are chemical, trading speed for complexity. The brief pause that occurs as neurotransmitters cross the synaptic cleft allows for regulation, integration, and learning qualities that make higher thought possible. Each synapse is surrounded by a network of supporting cells and molecular scaffolds that maintain its stability. Astrocytes, a type of glial cell, envelop many synapses, helping to regulate the concentration of ions and neurotransmitters in the surrounding space. They take up excess neurotransmitters after each signal, recycling them for future use, and preventing overstimulation. This cleaning process occurs constantly, maintaining the precision of communication and ensuring that signals remain distinct. The surrounding extracellular matrix, a delicate web of proteins and sugars, holds each synapse in place and contributes to its long-term structure. When neurotransmitters have completed their task, they must be cleared from the synaptic cleft to allow the next signal to occur. Some are broken down by enzymes, others are reabsorbed by the presynaptic cell in a process known as reuptake. This cycle of release, binding, and removal happens millions of times per second throughout the brain, a ceaseless exchange that sustains the rhythm of life. Many medications and drugs act upon this system, enhancing or inhibiting the release, reuptake, or breakdown of neurotransmitters. Antidepressants, for example, often slow the reuptake of serotonin, allowing it to linger longer in the synapse and amplify its effects. Though these interventions can influence mood and perception, they do so by interacting with the same ancient mechanisms that govern every moment of neural communication. The synapse is also the site where memory takes root. When we learn something new, the strength of specific synapses changes. New receptors are added to the postsynaptic membrane, or existing ones become more responsive. In some cases, new synapses are formed altogether, growing like tiny buds along the dendritic branches. These physical changes preserve the patterns of activity that correspond to experience. Even in sleep, the synapses continue their work, replaying and consolidating the day's events. This quiet sculpting of the neural landscape transforms fleeting moments into lasting knowledge, shaping who we are. It is extraordinary to think that everything we know, remember, or feel arises from the exchanges that take place across these minute spaces. Thought is not a continuous flow, but a series of leaps from one neuron to another, from one molecule to the next. The synapse is where continuity is created from interruption, where the pulse of energy becomes the substance of mind. It is a threshold between two cells, and yet it is also the threshold between perception and awareness, between the physical and the intangible. If we were to visualize the synapses of the brain all at once, they would resemble a vast galaxy, each connection glowing softly as it fires, flickering like starlight. Billions of these luminous points would shimmer in unison, forming constellations of thought and emotion. Each flicker represents a message sent, a sensation felt, a memory recalled. Together they weave the shimmering fabric of consciousness, a living network of connections that hums quietly beneath every waking and dreaming moment. In the silence of rest, when the mind drifts toward sleep, the synapses continue their endless exchange. They replay the patterns of the day, reinforcing the paths of memory, refining the flow of information. They do not sleep. They adjust, strengthen, and release, preparing the brain for the dawn of new experience. And when we awaken, it is through their work that the world returns, the soft light, the sense of movement, the gentle unfolding of awareness. All of it begins at the synapse, where neurons meet, where communication never ceases, and where the quiet magic of the mind takes form again and again. 8 electrical impulses and action potentials. Within the quiet interior of every neuron lies a hidden tension, an invisible balance of electrical charge that waits, patient and ready, for the moment it will be released. This is the foundation of all neural communication, the electrical impulse known as the action potential. It is a phenomenon so fleeting and delicate that it vanishes in less than 1,000th of a second, yet it carries the essence of every sensation, movement, and every thought. Like a wave that rolls endlessly across the ocean, action potentials surge through the body's neural pathways, uniting trillions of individual cells into one continuous network of awareness. To understand this process, it helps to imagine each neuron as a living battery, charged and polarized. At rest, when it is not transmitting a signal, the inside of the neuron holds a slightly negative charge compared to the fluid that surrounds it. This difference in electrical potential is known as the resting membrane potential, and it typically measures about 70 millivolts. Though small, this voltage is crucial, for it represents stored energy, like the tension of a coiled spring. It is created by the uneven distribution of ions, charged atoms across the neuron's membrane. On one side, sodium ions gather in high concentration outside the cell, while potassium ions are more abundant within. The membrane itself is selectively permeable, allowing some particles to pass while excluding others. and special proteins, known as ion pumps and channels, maintain this balance through constant, careful movement. Among the most important of these is the sodium-potassium pump, a microscopic transporter that works tirelessly, moving sodium ions out of the neuron and potassium ions in. Each cycle of this pump consumes energy in the form of ATP, the cell's universal fuel. Around it, other channels open briefly and close again, allowing small currents of ions to drift, adjusting the neuron's potential ever so slightly in response to the faint whispers of signals arriving from the dendrites. The result is a calm but dynamic equilibrium, a poised stillness from which sudden activity can arise. When enough excitatory input arrives from neighboring neurons, this delicate balance begins to change. The voltage at a specific region of the neuron, the axon hillock, rises gradually toward a threshold, typically around 55 millivolts. If the inputs are too weak or scattered, the voltage falls back to rest and the neuron remains silent. But when the threshold is reached, a dramatic transformation occurs. Voltage-gated sodium channels along the axon open in unison, and sodium ions rush inward, drawn by both electrical and chemical forces. In a fraction of a millisecond, the inside of the neuron becomes positively charged compared to the outside, reversing its polarity. This event, the rapid depolarization of the membrane, marks the birth of the action potential. Once triggered, the action potential is self-propagating. The influx of sodium ions at one point causes adjacent channels to open, creating a wave of depolarization that travels smoothly down the axon. The signal does not weaken as it moves. It renews itself at each step, as new channels open and others close behind them. Immediately after sodium floods in, those same channels begin to close, and voltage-gated potassium channels open, allowing potassium ions to flow outward. This restores the negative interior charge in a process known as repolarization. For a brief moment, the neuron becomes even more negative than usual, a state called hyperpolarization, before returning to its resting potential. Through this elegant choreography of ions, the neuron fires and resets, ready to begin again. What makes the action potential so extraordinary is its consistency. Every impulse within a given neuron is identical in size and duration. It either occurs completely or not at all, a principle known as the all or none law. A neuron cannot fire halfway or send a weaker version of its signal. Instead, the intensity of a stimulus is conveyed by the frequency of firing. A stronger stimulus causes a neuron to produce action potentials more rapidly, while a weaker one leads to slower firing. This simple, binary pattern, on or off, fast or slow, forms the language of the nervous system, a code capable of describing every nuance of sensation and behavior. Speed, too, is vital to this process. In unmyelinated axons, the action potential must travel continuously along the membrane, opening and closing channels at each point. This method, though reliable, is relatively slow. In myelinated axons, however, the insulating sheath allows the electrical current to leap between exposed gaps, the nodes of Ranvier, in a process known as saltatory conduction. Here, the signal moves at speeds of up to 120 meters per second, faster than a race car and thousands of times quicker than any chemical reaction alone could manage. It is this rapid conduction that enables the nervous system to coordinate complex movements and instantaneous reactions, linking thought to action with seamless precision. The generation of electrical impulses does not occur in isolation. Each action potential contributes to a cascade of communication, triggering the release of neurotransmitters at synaptic terminals. When the electrical wave reaches the end of the axon, it causes calcium ions to enter the terminal, prompting vesicles to fuse with the membrane and release their chemical cargo. These neurotransmitters cross the synaptic cleft, bind to receptors, and influence the next neuron's electrical state. In this way, electricity gives rise to chemistry, which in turn gives rise to new electricity, a cycle that repeats endlessly throughout the brain and body. Action potentials also vary in subtle but meaningful ways across different types of neurons. Some fire in rhythmic bursts, others in steady trains, and still others in complex patterns that encode information about timing or intensity. In sensory neurons, action potentials convey the outside world inward, the warmth of sunlight, the sharpness of sound, the pressure of touch. In motor neurons, they carry instructions outward to contract a muscle, to release a breath, to move a finger across a page. Deep within the brain, they form the basis of thought and emotion, memory and imagination, each impulse contributing to the delicate symphony of neural activity that defines consciousness. The precise timing of action potentials is crucial. In many neural circuits, information is encoded not only by the rate of firing but also by the synchronization of multiple neurons. When groups of neurons fire together in rhythmic patterns, they generate oscillations, or brain waves, that can be detected by electrodes on the scalp. These waves occur at different frequencies, slow waves during deep sleep, faster ones during alertness or focus. They represent the collective rhythm of billions of action potentials, rising and falling like the tides of a living ocean. Even when the body rests, action potentials continue their gentle work. They maintain heartbeat and breathing, regulate temperature, and keep the senses faintly alert to the world. During sleep, patterns of electrical activity shift, becoming slower and more regular as the brain consolidates memories and restores balance. Dreams, too, are born of action potentials. They're unpredictable combinations, producing images and sensations that feel as real as waking life. The nervous system never truly falls silent. It merely changes tempo, adjusting the flow of its electrical currents to the needs of each moment. The beauty of the action potential lies in its simplicity. It is a binary event, a spark of energy that either happens or does not, yet from this simplicity emerges the vast complexity of the human mind. Through the interplay of billions of such sparks, the brain perceives, remembers, and creates. Every thought, every heartbeat, every flicker of emotion begins as a tiny wave of voltage sweeping along a microscopic fiber. It is the pulse of life made visible, the quiet fire that animates the living body. To imagine the action potential is to imagine light moving through darkness, a brief flash that travels unbroken, leaving no mark except the continuation of its journey. It is constant renewal, an endless conversation between ions and membranes, between energy and form, and though it lasts only for a moment, that moment repeats itself billions of times every second across the nervous system, ensuring that the body remains awake, aware, and connected to itself. In the silence that follows each impulse, the neuron rests once more, its balance restored, its energy replenished. But even in that calm, it waits, poised for the next signal, the next flicker of life. The cycle of firing and resting continues without pause, a rhythm older than thought, older than memory, yet as present and essential as the beating of the heart. The action potential is not just a mechanism. It is the heartbeat of the mind itself, the spark that keeps the living world forever in motion. 9. The role of neurotransmitters. In the hidden spaces between neurons, where electrical energy gives way to chemistry, lies one of the most exquisite systems ever formed, the language of neurotransmitters. These tiny molecules are the messengers of the nervous system, carrying information from one cell to the next across the delicate bridge of the synapse. Without them, the brain's electrical symphony would fall silent. The signals racing through axons would reach their end and vanish, unable to continue their journey. Neurotransmitters make connection possible. They transform fleeting electrical impulses into chemical whispers that leap from neuron to neuron, guiding every thought, every sensation, and every movement. Within their dance lies the essence of communication, not only between cells, but within the living experience of the mind itself. A neurotransmitter begins its life deep within the neuron, formed through intricate biochemical processes inside the soma, and transported along the axon to the synaptic terminals. There, they are stored in tiny, spherical vesicles, waiting for the moment they are needed. When an electrical impulse and action potential reaches the end of the axon, it triggers a sudden influx of calcium ions. The change in charge causes the vesicles to move toward the presynaptic membrane, where they fuse and release their contents into the narrow synaptic cleft. In less than a millisecond, thousands of neurotransmitter molecules are set free, diffusing rapidly toward the surface of the postsynaptic cell. There, they bind to receptors, specialized proteins that recognize their shape and chemistry with perfect precision. In this instant of binding, a new signal is born, one that will shape the next neuron's activity. The effects of neurotransmitters can be gentle or powerful, fleeting or long-lasting. Some excite the next neuron, making it more likely to fire its own electrical impulse, while others inhibit activity, calming the system and creating balance. These two opposing forces, excitation and inhibition, form the foundation of all neural activity. The balance between them determines whether the body moves, the heart races, the mind focuses, or the senses rest. In this dynamic equilibrium lies the stability of thought and emotion. Glutamate, the most abundant, serves as the primary excitatory transmitter, found in more than half of all synapses. It is responsible for stimulating activity, forming the basis of learning and memory. When glutamate binds to its receptors, it opens ion channels that allow positively charged particles to flow into the cell, bringing it closer to the threshold for firing. Yet too much glutamate can be dangerous, overstimulating neurons and leading to damage. For this reason, the brain keeps its levels under tight control, recycling molecules as soon as they have served their purpose. Balancing glutamate's excitation is GABA-gamma aminobutyric acid, the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. Where glutamate stirs the neurons to action, GABA soothes them, opening channels that allow negative ions to enter the cell, making it less likely to fire. This quieting influence prevents overstimulation and maintains harmony across neural networks. It is GABA's calming effect that many sedatives, tranquilizers, and sleep medications enhance, amplifying the brain's natural capacity for rest and relaxation. In every waking and sleeping moment, the dialogue between glutamate and GABA shapes the tempo of thought. The rhythm of awareness. Another key player in the neural orchestra is dopamine, a neurotransmitter often associated with reward, motivation, and movement. When we experience something pleasurable, the taste of food, the sound of music, the warmth of connection, dopamine is released in circuits that reinforce the behavior, encouraging us to seek it again. It is also crucial for fine motor control, guiding precise movements through pathways that link the brain to the body. Too little dopamine in certain areas, as in Parkinson's disease, leads to tremors and stiffness. Too much activity in others can contribute to disorders of thought and perception. In this balance, dopamine acts not as a source of pleasure itself, but as a signal of importance, a gentle nudge from the brain, saying, "Remember this, it matters." Serotonin, by contrast, flows like a stabilizing current through the emotional landscape. It influences mood, sleep, appetite, and perception, contributing to a sense of contentment and calm. Low levels of serotonin have been linked to depression and anxiety, while balanced levels support well-being and steady energy. Many antidepressant medications work by increasing the availability of serotonin in the synapse, allowing its effects to linger. Though its influence is subtle, serotonin's presence is felt throughout the body, even beyond the brain and the gut, where many of its receptors reside, regulating digestion and contributing to the intimate link between mind and body. Acetylcholine is another essential neurotransmitter, serving as the bridge between nerves and muscles. When motor neurons release it at the junction where they meet muscle fibers, acetylcholine binds to receptors that cause the muscle to contract. It is through this simple mechanism that every movement, from the blink of an eye to the beat of the heart, takes place. In the brain, acetylcholine also plays a role in attention, learning, and memory. Its gradual loss in certain regions is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, illustrating how deeply our ability to remember and move depends on this single molecule's presence. Then there are the neurotransmitters that shape our sense of calm and resilience: norepinephrine, which sharpens alertness and focus, and endorphins, the brain's natural painkillers, released in response to stress or exertion. These molecules, together with dozens of others, form a chemical symphony in which each plays a part, blending excitation, inhibition, and modulation into the fluid melody of consciousness. The precise balance of these chemicals changes from moment to moment, influenced by experience, thought, environment, and even the time of day. Though neurotransmitters are often classified by their primary effects, their actions are not fixed. The same molecule can produce different results depending on where it is released and which receptors it binds to. A neurotransmitter might excite one neuron while inhibiting another, or trigger a cascade of slower, more complex effects through what are known as metabotropic receptors. These receptors do not open ion channels directly, but instead activate internal signaling pathways that can alter gene expression or strengthen synaptic connections over time. Such mechanisms allow the brain to adapt and learn, ensuring that the chemical language of neurons remains flexible and responsive to experience. Once a neurotransmitter has done its work, it must be cleared from the synapse to make way for the next signal. Some are broken down by enzymes. Others are drawn back into the presynaptic neuron in a process known as reuptake. This constant recycling keeps communication efficient and prevents messages from blending together. The brain's ability to maintain this rapid turnover, thousands of releases and reabsorptions each second, is a testament to its exquisite precision. In moments of calm, when the body rests and the mind drifts, neurotransmitters continue their invisible exchange. The gentle interplay of GABA and serotonin guides the transition into sleep. Acetylcholine and dopamine shape the patterns of dreaming, and as the night deepens, slower waves of neural activity sweep across the cortex, washing over billions of synapses in rhythmic cycles. The brain, though resting, remains alive with chemical conversation. Even the stillness of sleep is woven from the quiet murmurs of neurotransmitters, sustaining the delicate equilibrium between consciousness and rest. During waking hours, this same chemical language animates every perception. When light strikes the retina, neurotransmitters translate it into electrical signals that the brain interprets as vision. When sound waves vibrate the tiny hairs in the inner ear, they too are converted into neurotransmitter release, carrying the message of tone and rhythm. Every sensation we experience is mediated by these molecules, ephemeral messengers that flicker into existence, deliver their message, and disappear, leaving only the impression of thought or feeling behind. The vastness of their influence can be difficult to comprehend. Within a single second, trillions of neurotransmitter molecules are released across the brain, each one part of a larger pattern that defines who we are. They do not think or decide, yet through them, thought and decision emerge. They do not feel, yet through their motion, emotion takes shape. The brain is not ruled by electricity alone nor by chemistry alone, but by their seamless integration, the electrical spark igniting the chemical wave. In this interplay lies the quiet miracle of being. The neurotransmitters, unseen and unending, sustain the flow of consciousness from one moment to the next. They are the translators of the nervous system, converting pulses into meaning, sensation into memory, and memory into experience. Through their ceaseless work, the neurons remain in harmony, and the mind, in all its complexity, continues to awaken to the world. 10. Communication between nerve cells. The human nervous system is a vast and intricate web of communication, a network so immense that within it, every thought, movement, and sensation finds its place. At its heart lies the constant conversation between nerve cells, a symphony of electrical impulses and chemical exchanges that never truly ends. Each neuron, though a single cell, is part of this greater dialogue, passing messages onward through countless connections that stretch across the body and the brain. This communication is what makes awareness possible. It is the silent language of life itself. To imagine the conversation between nerve cells is to envision a landscape alive with light. Each neuron stands like a luminous tree in an endless forest, its branches stretching outward, reaching toward the faint glimmers of others. When one fires, a pulse of energy moves swiftly down its axon, racing to the synaptic terminals, where it releases its chemical messengers. These neurotransmitters drift across the narrow synaptic cleft and bind to the waiting receptors on another neuron's dendrites. In that moment, the signal continues its journey not as a single flash of energy, but as a wave of meaning passed from cell to cell. Through this process, information flows seamlessly through the nervous system, linking perception to memory, thought to action, sensation to understanding. This exchange does not happen at random. Each neuron is connected to thousands of others, yet it speaks selectively, forming networks dedicated to specific functions. Some circuits control movement, others interpret sound or sight, while others govern emotion or reasoning. Within the brain, these circuits intertwine in complex patterns, allowing multiple regions to work together in harmony. The neuron's communication is thus not just a transfer of energy, but a carefully orchestrated system of integration and coordination. It is through this continuous interplay that consciousness arises not from any single neuron, but from the shared rhythm of billions working as one. The communication between nerve cells begins with electrical activity but is carried forward by chemistry. An action potential traveling along the axon triggers the release of neurotransmitters at the synapse. These chemical messengers bind to receptors on the postsynaptic cell, creating small changes in voltage called graded potentials. If enough of these excitatory signals arrive close together, the voltage in the postsynaptic neuron reaches a threshold, and a new action potential begins. The process repeats, neuron after neuron, creating a chain reaction that can span long distances and complex circuits. It is through these repeated exchanges that the nervous system processes information, translating sensory input into response, thought into movement, and experience into memory. But communication between neurons is not merely a matter of transmission. It is also a matter of modulation. Not every signal results in a response. Some synapses inhibit activity rather than promote it, calming overexcited pathways and maintaining balance. This inhibition is as essential as excitation, for without it, the brain would be overwhelmed by its own activity. It is through the gentle interplay of stimulation and restraint that the nervous system achieves clarity. Just as a piece of music depends on both sound and silence, so too does neural communication depend on both action and rest. At any given moment, billions of these microscopic exchanges are taking place throughout the brain. In sensory regions, neurons transmit signals from the eyes, ears, and skin, converting light, vibration, and pressure into electrical patterns that the brain interprets as vision, sound, and touch. In the motor cortex, neurons send messages down the spinal cord to the muscles, commanding them to contract or relax in precise coordination. In deeper regions, within the limbic system, neurons carry signals that shape emotion and memory, linking feelings to experiences and sensations to meaning. And in the prefrontal cortex, the most complex of all, countless neurons interact to form reasoning, decision-making, and imagination. Every aspect of being, every thought, every reflex, every feeling arises from this intricate web of communication. The efficiency of neural communication depends not only on the speed of action potentials, but also on the structure of the networks they form. Neurons are not connected randomly. Their connections are shaped by use, experience, and necessity. Pathways that are frequently activated become stronger as repeated signaling enhances synaptic efficiency. This process, known as Hebbian learning, can be summarized simply: neurons that fire together wire together. Through repetition, communication between certain neurons becomes faster and more reliable. This is how skills are learned, habits formed, and memories stored. The very architecture of the brain shifts and adapts as experience etches new pathways into its structure, refining communication and deepening understanding. Even within a single network, signals can flow in many directions. Refine it. Feedback loops form, allowing the brain to adjust its own activity in real time. This continuous self-regulation prevents chaos, ensuring that no part of the system becomes too active or too quiet. It is a kind of dynamic equilibrium, a living balance between excitation and inhibition, action and reflection. This constant adjustment is what gives the brain its stability and adaptability, its ability to focus on a single task or shift attention in an instant. Beyond the individual synapse, neurons also communicate through larger-scale synchronization. When groups of neurons fire together in rhythmic patterns, they generate brain waves oscillations that can be measured across different frequencies. Slow waves dominate in sleep, guiding the brain through cycles of rest and restoration, while faster waves accompany alertness, attention, and problem-solving. These collective rhythms coordinate activity across distant regions, allowing the brain to function as a unified whole. Even though each neuron fires independently, their patterns align, forming a coherent rhythm that sustains awareness. The communication between nerve cells extends beyond the brain and throughout the entire body. The spinal cord acts as a central highway, carrying messages from the brain to the limbs and back again. Motor neurons send impulses outward to muscles, while sensory neurons bring information inward from the environment. In the peripheral nervous system, clusters of neurons form ganglia that help regulate automatic processes such as heart rate, digestion, and breathing. These networks operate largely without conscious thought. The quiet heartbeat that continues while we sleep, the steady rhythm of the lungs, the constriction of the pupils in bright light, all are the result of communication between nerve cells that never ceases. Even within this complexity, there is a simplicity to be found. The principles that govern communication between neurons are universal. The same mechanisms that allow a muscle to move also allow a thought to form. Electrical impulses, chemical messengers, and feedback loops combine in patterns that repeat at every level of organization. It is this repetition that gives the nervous system its elegance and coherence. From the simplest reflex to the most profound act of imagination, the process remains the same. A signal arises, travels, connects, and transforms. Communication between neurons is also marked by resilience. Even when some pathways are damaged, others can adapt to take their place. New connections can form, and old ones can be strengthened through experience. This ability, known as neuroplasticity, ensures that the brain remains flexible and capable of recovery. When we learn a new language, practice a skill, or heal from injury, we are witnessing this process in action, the brain reshaping itself through communication. The very act of thought leaves a trace, altering the way neurons connect and speak to one another. In the quiet hours of night, when the mind drifts into sleep, the dialogue between neurons continues in a softer rhythm. Patterns of activity shift, replaying the experiences of the day, consolidating them into memory. The brain rehearses, refines, and reorganizes its networks, strengthening what is important and letting go of what is not. The communication does not stop. It becomes restorative, like the slow breathing of the body at rest. To reflect on the communication between nerve cells is to glimpse the essence of life's continuity. Each neuron, though small and silent on its own, contributes to a chorus that never stops singing. Within this chorus, every movement, thought, and emotion arises as a transient harmony of signals, woven together with perfect timing. The neuron speaks through electricity and listens through chemistry. Every heartbeat, in every moment of awareness, this communication unfolds. It is unseen, yet constant, microscopic, yet immense. The nervous system does not shout. It whispers, endlessly, in a language of currents and molecules. And through these whispers, the story of life continues uninterrupted, luminous, and infinitely connected. 11. Sensory and motor neurons. Every moment of human experience, every movement, every perception, begins with the work of two extraordinary types of nerve cells, the sensory and the motor neurons. Together, they form the bridge between the mind and the physical world, carrying information in both directions across the vast network of the nervous system. Sensory neurons bring messages inward, gathering data from the environment and the body's internal state, while motor neurons send commands outward, turning thought into motion. Between them lies the intricate web of interneurons that interpret, coordinate, and refine the flow of information. Is this delicate interplay that makes possible the unity of perception and action, the harmony between awareness and movement that defines the living body. The journey begins with sensation. All around us, the world speaks in patterns of light, vibration, temperature, and touch. The sensory neurons are the translators of this language, converting physical stimuli into the electrical signals that the brain can understand. Scattered across the skin, embedded in muscles and organs, and clustered within the sensory organs, these neurons form a network of remarkable sensitivity. When a fingertip brushes against a textured surface, tiny receptors in the skin detect pressure and vibration. When light enters the eye, photoreceptor cells in the retina transform it into patterns of nerve impulses. When sound waves ripple through the air, hair cells in the inner ear bend gently, generating signals that encode pitch and volume. Sensory neurons, which then carry their signals toward the spinal cord and brain. The axons of sensory neurons form the body's incoming highways of information. They travel through peripheral nerves and enter the spinal cord through its dorsal roots, where they branch and connect with interneurons in higher centers. From there, the signals ascend through intricate pathways to reach the brain's sensory regions. In the somatosensory cortex, touch and pressure are mapped across the surface of the body with exquisite precision. Each region of the skin corresponds to a specific area of the brain, forming a topographical map that allows us to know where a sensation arises. Similar maps exist for vision, hearing, and other senses, organizing the flow of sensory data into coherent perception. Sensory neurons vary greatly in form and function. Some are simple and direct, responding quickly to stimuli and sending signals through short pathways that control reflexes. Others are highly complex, involving multiple layers of processing before reaching consciousness. For example, the photoreceptors in the retina connect to bipolar and ganglion cells before their signals even leave the eye, allowing for contrast enhancement and motion detection at the earliest stages. In the auditory system, sound is analyzed by frequency before being transmitted to the brain, enabling us to distinguish the soft rustle of leaves from the distant hum of a machine. The sensory system is not a passive receiver of information, but an active interpreter, refining and shaping the data it collects long before it reaches awareness. Once sensory information has been processed and interpreted, the brain responds by sending out signals to the muscles and glands commands carried by motor neurons. These neurons are the body's messengers of action, transforming neural impulses into movement. Every gesture, every heartbeat, every word spoken arises from their precise coordination. The cell bodies, of motor neurons reside primarily in the spinal cord and brainstem. From there, their long axons extend outward through the body's nerves, branching to reach individual muscle fibers. At the junction where a motor neuron meets a muscle, a specialized synapse called the neuromuscular junction, the neuron releases acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that causes the muscle to contract. It is through this elegant mechanism that thought becomes motion and intention becomes reality. Motor neurons can be divided into two main types: upper motor neurons, which originate in the brain's motor cortex and direct voluntary movement, and lower motor neurons, which reside in the spinal cord and directly stimulate muscles. The upper motor neurons send their axons downward through long tracts that cross at the brainstem, ensuring that each hemisphere of the brain controls the opposite side of the body. The lower motor neurons, in turn, form the final pathway from the nervous system to the muscles. Together, they coordinate the graceful choreography of movement, from the fine control of a pianist's fingers to the strength of a runner's stride. Reflexes demonstrate one of the simplest and most efficient forms of communication between sensory and motor neurons. When you touch something hot, sensory neurons in the skin instantly detect the temperature change and send a signal to the spinal cord. There, instead of waiting for the brain's input, interneurons connect directly with motor neurons, commanding the muscles to withdraw the hand. This reflex happens in less than a second, a protective shortcut that allows the body to respond before pain is even consciously felt. Reflexes like these are vital survival mechanisms, automatic loops that preserve the body's safety without requiring thought. Beyond these automatic responses, sensory and motor neurons work together to create the fluid, continuous experience of life. When you walk, sensory feedback from muscles and joints tells the brain where your limbs are and how much force is needed to maintain balance. The brain responds by adjusting the output of motor neurons, fine-tuning every step. This constant exchange, occurring hundreds of times each second, allows movement to remain stable and coordinated. Even seemingly simple actions, like reaching for an object or turning your head toward a sound, require precise communication between sensory input and motor output, each influencing the other in real time. This interaction extends beyond movement. When we speak, the muscles of the tongue, throat, and lips are guided by sensory feedback that ensures clarity and tone. When we play an instrument, motor neurons direct the fingers, while sensory neurons monitor pressure and position. When we write, our movements adjust continually to the texture of the paper and the flow of the pen. In every case, sensory and motor systems operate not as separate entities, but as partners in a continuous cycle of azakayan, information, perception, guiding action, and action refining perception. Even in stillness, this dialogue persists. The sensory neurons monitor the body's internal state, measuring temperature, blood pressure, and oxygen levels. They inform the brain of hunger, thirst, fatigue, and pain. Motor neurons, in turn, carry out subtle adjustments, increasing the heart rate, expanding the lungs, or altering posture to preserve internal harmony. These processes occur without awareness, yet they are as vital as the conscious actions we perform each day. When either sensory or motor neurons are damaged, the effects are profound. Loss of sensory function can leave the world silent and numb, while injury to motor pathways can rob the body of movement. Diseases that affect motor neurons, such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, gradually weaken muscles as communication between brain and body breaks down. Conditions that damage sensory neurons can disrupt balance, coordination, or the ability to feel pain, making the simplest tasks dangerous. Yet, even in such adversity, the nervous system often finds ways to adapt. Other pathways may strengthen, new connections may form, and with time and rehabilitation, some functions can return. The body's resilience reflects the remarkable plasticity of its neural networks. a constant striving for communication, even when the lines have been disrupted. At the deepest level, the partnership between sensory and motor neurons reflects the unity of experience and expression. Through the sensory system, we receive the world. Through the motor system, we respond to it. Together, they form a loop, a circle of interaction that defines life itself. Every act of perception invites a response, and every action generates new sensations, feeding the loop anew. This cycle continues unbroken, moment after moment, weaving the fabric of awareness. If we could visualize this process, it might appear as a continuous current of light flowing through the body, sensory signals rising upward, motor signals descending, converging and diverging in a perfect rhythm. The brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves all pulse with the same gentle energy, translating between the outer world and the inner self. Even as we rest, these pathways remain active, maintaining posture, heartbeat, and breath, ensuring that the conversation between body and mind never stops. The sensory and motor neurons are not merely components of the nervous system. They are the instruments through which life is experienced and expressed. In their endless exchange, the body finds awareness, purpose, and motion. Through them, the world touches us, and we, in turn, reach back toward it. And as long as they continue their silent dialogue, the miracle of connection endures the constant interplay between feeling and doing, between knowing and becoming, that sustains the living mind. 12. Networks and neural pathways. Beneath the quiet rhythm of the body lies a universe of connections so vast and intricate that even the most powerful instruments can only glimpse its immensity. The human brain, with its billions of neurons, is not a random collection of cells, but an organized web of communication, a network of networks, woven together through trillions of pathways. Each neuron is a point of contact, a tiny intersection where information converges and flows outward again. Together, they form the architecture of thought, perception, and memory, a living map of the self. To understand how the brain functions, one must look not only at individual neurons, but at the endless patterns they form as they link together in circuits that hum with the quiet electricity of life. A neural network begins with connection. Each neuron reaches outward through its axon and inward through its dendrites, establishing links with countless others. Where these connections meet, at the synapses, the exchange of neurotransmitters creates the flow of information. No neuron acts alone. It becomes meaningful only within its context, as part of a greater pattern. One neuron may send its signal to hundreds of others, each of which will, in turn. The brain's power arises not from the strength of any single cell, but from the coordination of all of them, a symphony of signals conducted across time and space. These networks are not random. They are arranged with purpose, shaped by function, and refined by experience. In the sensory systems, networks receive input from the external world, light, sound, touch, and process it through successive layers, each one extracting new details. In the visual system, for example, signals from the eyes travel first to the thalamus, then to the primary visual cortex, where neurons respond to basic patterns like lines and edges. From there, information flows through other regions that interpret movement, color, and depth, eventually forming the rich tapestry of sight. Each stage represents a new level of abstraction, transforming raw sensory data into meaning. Elsewhere in the brain, motor networks perform the reverse operation. They begin with intention, a decision to act, and translate it into precise movements. In these pathways, neurons in the motor cortex send their signals down through the spinal cord to activate specific muscle groups. Feedback from sensory neurons then informs the brain of the movement's success, allowing it to adjust and refine its output. This constant exchange between sensory and motor networks ensures that action and perception remain intertwined, guiding the body with grace and precision. The connections between these networks are maintained through neural pathways, bundles of axons that travel together like cables, linking distant regions of the brain. Some of these pathways are short, carrying messages between neighboring areas, while others stretch across hemispheres, bridging vast distances. The corpus callosum, for instance, is a thick band of fibers that connects the left and right halves of the brain, allowing them to share information seamlessly. Other pathways link the cortex to deeper structures such as the thalamus, basal ganglia, and brainstem, integrating thought with instinct and emotion. Through these pathways, the brain operates as a unified whole, with each region contributing to the flow of awareness. Within these networks, patterns of activity form and dissolve continuously. Some pathways become dominant as we focus or act, while others fall silent, waiting to be reawakened. The brain's efficiency lies in this dynamic flexibility, its ability to shift resources from one network to another depending on need. When we learn something new, the brain does not simply store the information in one place. It strengthens the connections between many regions, allowing for faster and more coordinated processing. These strengthened pathways are like well-worn trails through a forest, easier to follow with each passing step. Over time, they form the basis of memory, habit, and expertise. Neural networks are not fixed, they evolve with experience. This adaptability, known as neuroplasticity, is one of the most extraordinary features of the human brain. When a new skill is practiced repeatedly, the pathways involved become more efficient. Synapses grow stronger, new branches form, and communication becomes smoother. The brain rewires itself in response to need, reorganizing its networks to meet the demands of learning or recovery. Even after injury, new pathways can form to compensate for lost connections, allowing the brain to regain function. This constant renewal ensures that the network of neurons remains alive and responsive, shaped by both the outer world and the inner life of the mind. The efficiency of these pathways also depends on rhythm. Neural communication does not occur in isolation, but in patterns of timing and synchronization. Groups of neurons often fire together in rhythmic waves, creating oscillations that link different parts of the brain. These waves vary in speed, slow delta rhythms during deep sleep, faster beta and gamma rhythms during wakefulness and focus. Like the coordinated beat of a pulse, these oscillations keep communication coherent. When these rhythms falter, as in certain neurological disorders, communication becomes disorganized, and the smooth integration of thought and action is disrupted. Beyond the large-scale organization of networks, the brain's pathways are also defined by their delicacy. Each connection must be maintained through constant chemical and electrical activity. Axons rely on glial cells for support and nourishment, while synapses depend on the precise balance of neurotransmitters to transmit signals. Even the tiniest imbalance, too much excitation or too little inhibition, can cause instability, leading to fatigue, confusion, or disease. The health of the network depends on equilibrium, a steady conversation between energy and rest. Neural networks also extend beyond the brain into the spinal cord and peripheral nerves, forming a single, integrated system. Sensory pathways carry information inward, motor pathways carry commands outward, and autonomic pathways regulate the body's internal functions: heart rate, digestion, breathing, and temperature. These networks operate both independently and cooperatively, maintaining the seamless continuity between consciousness and the body's automatic rhythms. Even the quiet beating of the heart and the steady flow of breath are guided by neural circuits that work tirelessly without entering awareness. The complexity of these networks is such that even the smallest pattern of activity can hold profound meaning. A single network might govern the recognition of a face, the recall of a melody, or the comprehension of a word. Yet no network works in isolation. Each one depends on countless others, exchanging signals in loops of feedback and feed-forward communication. When we remember, multiple regions activate together, those for perception, emotion, and language, all intertwining to reconstruct an experience. In this way, every thought is distributed across the brain, existing not in one location but in the pattern of activity itself. This interdependence means that the brain is more than a collection of parts. The neural pathways linking its regions form a map that is both physical and dynamic, constantly changing with experience, emotion, and time. The mind's continuity, its ability to move seamlessly from one idea to another, arises from these connections. The flow of consciousness is not a single line, but a vast network of converging and diverging signals, looping endlessly through the architecture of the nervous system. Even during rest, when the body is still and the eyes are closed, certain networks remain active. This background activity, known as the default mode network, reflects the brain's constant engagement with memory, imagination, and self-reflection. It is the quiet hum of the mind when it is not focused on the external world, a reminder that even in silence, the brain continues to connect, to weave patterns of thought from the raw material of memory. In sleep, too, the networks of the brain remain alive, reorganizing and consolidating the experiences of the day. Synapses strengthen or weaken, pathways are refined, and memories are integrated into the broader web of understanding. The process is gentle but profound, a nightly renewal of the neural map that defines who we are. By morning, the pathways are subtly altered, shaped by dreams, rest, and the quiet processing that occurs beneath awareness. To contemplate these networks is to recognize that the brain is not static but fluid, not a machine but a living landscape. Its pathways shimmer and shift with every moment, guided by the endless flow of information that passes through them. Within their complexity lies simplicity, a rhythm of signal and silence, excitation and rest. Each neuron, each synapse, each pathway contributes to the vast harmony that sustains consciousness. And as we drift toward sleep or awakening, these same pathways continue their ceaseless work, carrying thoughts like soft currents through the ocean of the mind. They link past and present, body and spirit, sensation and idea, in an unbroken chain of communication. The neural networks are the architecture of being itself, the invisible threads that bind the self together, shaping the quiet miracle of awareness that endures from one breath to the next. 13. The plastic brain. The human brain is often described as the most complex structure in the known universe. Yet within that complexity lies a remarkable and gentle truth: the brain is not fixed. It is fluid, adaptable, and ever-changing. It reshapes itself quietly and continuously, responding to every experience, every sensation, and every thought. This ability to change its structure and function in response to experience is called neuroplasticity, or simply brain plasticity. It is the reason we can learn, recover, and grow throughout our lives. The plastic brain is not a rigid machine of predetermined parts, but a living landscape, reshaping its own pathways as time flows through it. From the moment of birth, the brain begins weaving its network of connections, guided by both genetics and experience. In infancy, billions of neurons reach outward, forming new synapses at a breathtaking rate. Each sound, touch, and image encountered in those early days becomes a thread in the brain's growing tapestry of connections. During this period, the brain's plasticity is immense. Neural pathways form and reorganize with ease, allowing a baby to absorb language, movement, and emotional cues from the surrounding world. Every smile mirrored, every sound imitated, every object grasped contributes to the creation of a unique and personal architecture of thought. As the child grows, this flurry of neural construction gradually slows, and a new phase begins: refinement. Connections that are used frequently become stronger, while those that are neglected begin to fade. This process, known as synaptic pruning, ensures that the brain becomes more efficient, Like a gardener trimming a tree to help it grow straight and strong, the brain removes excess connections so that the most useful pathways can flourish. What remains is not a loss, but a form of sculpting. The brain shapes itself according to experience, becoming a reflection of the life it has lived. In adulthood, the pace of structural change slows, but it never stops. The adult brain continues to adapt, learning new skills, forming new memories. Injury. Even as the body ages, neurons remain capable of growing new dendritic branches and forming new synapses. This quiet adaptability allows us to continue learning throughout life, to acquire languages, to develop musical ability, to adapt to new environments or technologies. Each act of learning strengthens the connections between neurons, making communication more efficient and patterns of activity more refined. With repetition and practice, the brain's circuitry reorganizes, transforming effort into ease. This plasticity is not limited to learning. It is also the foundation of healing. When part of the brain is damaged, as after a stroke or injury, other regions can sometimes take over the lost function. New pathways form, allowing signals to bypass damaged areas. Physical therapy, mental training, and sensory stimulation can all encourage this reorganization, guiding the brain toward recovery. The process is gradual, but it reveals a deep resilience, the brain's determination to maintain function, to rebuild itself through change. Even in the face of loss, the plastic brain continues to search for new routes, new patterns, and new ways to connect. At the cellular level, neuroplasticity involves a delicate dance of chemical and structural changes. When neurons fire together repeatedly, the connections between them strengthen, a principle famously summarized as cells that fire together, wire together. Known as long-term potentiation, depends on molecular processes that enhance the efficiency of synaptic transmission. The more two neurons communicate, the more responsive they become to each other. Over time, this process lays down the foundations of memory and learning. The opposite process, long-term depression, weakens connections that are rarely used, clearing space for new growth. Through these opposing forces, the brain maintains balance, shedding what is unnecessary while reinforcing what is vital. Plasticity operates at every level of organization. On a microscopic scale, it alters the strength and number of synapses. On a larger scale, it reorganizes entire networks, shifting functions between regions. For instance, in individuals who lose their sight early in life, the visual cortex normally dedicated to processing light can be repurposed for touch or hearing. This reallocation of function allows the brain to compensate, turning loss into adaptation. Similarly, musicians who practice for years develop enlarged and more efficient networks in the regions associated with auditory and motor control. Experience shapes not only what the brain does, but how it is built. Emotions, too, influence the plastic nature of the brain. Strong emotional experiences can etch lasting patterns into neural circuits, forming memories that are difficult to forget. The amygdala, the brain's center for emotional processing, interacts with the hippocampus, which stores memory, strengthening connections. During moments of heightened feeling, this mechanism ensures that emotionally significant events are remembered vividly, an evolutionary safeguard that helps us learn from experience. Yet the same process can also give rise to persistent emotional patterns, such as anxiety or fear, when reinforced too strongly. The brain's adaptability, while powerful, is neutral. It can shape both healing and harm depending on what it encounters. In recent years, science has discovered that even the generation of new neurons, a process called neurogenesis, continues into adulthood, particularly in regions like the hippocampus. These new cells integrate into existing circuits, enhancing the brain's flexibility and capacity for learning. Physical exercise, enriched environments, and mental engagement all encourage this growth. The discovery of adult neurogenesis has reshaped our understanding of the brain, showing that renewal is possible not only through the rewiring of existing cells, but also through the birth of new ones. The brain is not static matter. It is living tissue, in constant dialogue with experience. Modern life continues to test and reveal the extent of this adaptability. The brain of a person who reads, writes, or speaks multiple languages shows unique patterns of connectivity compared to one who does not. The neural pathways of a dancer or athlete differ from those of a painter or mathematician, each shaped by the demands of practice. Even in the digital age, where screens and technology mediate much of human experience, the brain continues to adjust, creating new pathways for processing information, attention, and interaction. The adaptability that once helped humanity master fire and language now helps it navigate the complexities of modern existence. Plasticity also reflects the profound connection between mind and body. The state of the body influences the brain's capacity to change. Adequate sleep consolidates new learning, stabilizing the synaptic modifications formed during the day. Nutrition provides the molecules needed for new growth. Movement and exercise stimulate the release of growth factors that support synaptic health. Meditation and mindfulness practices, by calming the nervous system, can alter patterns of connectivity in regions related to attention and emotion. The brain, in its plasticity, listens to the rhythms of the body, responding to care with renewal. Yet neuroplasticity is not boundless. It requires balance. Too little change can lead to rigidity, habits, and patterns that resist new learning. Too much can result in instability, where the brain struggles to maintain focus or coherence. The nervous system thrives on equilibrium, strengthening connections that support stability while preserving flexibility for growth. This harmony allows for both continuity and transformation, the capacity to remain oneself while evolving through experience. Even in the quiet of rest, the plastic brain continues to reshape itself. During sleep, neurons replay patterns of activity from the day, reinforcing what is important and discarding what is not. Dreams may serve as the echo of this process, the mind's way of weaving new understanding from fragments of memory. When morning comes, the brain is subtly altered, refreshed, reorganized, and prepared to learn anew. To reflect on the plastic brain is to recognize that change is not an interruption of life, but its very essence. The brain grows through experience, learning, recovery, and even through loss. It is a structure built to adapt, to remember, and to imagine. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, and every movement we make leaves a trace, a faint pathway that strengthens with repetition. Over time, these traces accumulate, forming the intricate design of who we are. The plastic brain is, in the truest sense, a record of living. It carries the marks of every joy and every sorrow, every lesson and every moment of wonder. It is not fixed in form but alive with potential, a testament to the mind's ability to change and to heal. Within its quiet adaptability lies the story of resilience, the promise that, even in the face of challenge, the brain can find new ways to connect, to understand, and to continue its ceaseless conversation with the world. 14. Supporting cells, the glial network. Beneath the graceful pulse of neurons, beneath the spark of their electrical signals and the delicate flow of neurotransmitters, exists a quieter but equally essential world, the realm of glial cells. For centuries, these cells were overlooked, their presence noted but their purpose misunderstood. Early scientists believed that glial cells were simply the glue that held the nervous system together, passive structures supporting the true work of the neurons. But as our understanding deepened, a more profound truth emerged. Glial cells are not mere bystanders. They are caretakers, regulators, protectors, and partners. Without them, neurons could not survive. Signals could not travel, and the harmony of the nervous system would collapse into silence. The term glia comes from the Greek word for glue, yet these cells are far more than a binding substance. They make up roughly half of the brain's volume, and their numbers exceed those of neurons in many regions. They are the unseen framework of the mind, maintaining its balance, nourishing its delicate structures, and guiding its growth. While neurons communicate through quick flashes of electrical energy, glial cells operate with a slower, steadier rhythm, a constant hum of maintenance and regulation that sustains the neural landscape. Their communication may not create conscious thought, but it makes consciousness possible. There are several types of glial cells, each with its own quiet purpose. Astrocytes, named for their star-like shape, are among the most abundant. Their many branches extend outward, wrapping around neurons, synapses, and blood vessels. Through these extensions, they maintain the chemical environment in which neurons thrive. Astrocytes regulate the concentration of ions and neurotransmitters, ensuring that signals remain clear and balanced. They supply nutrients, remove waste, and form part of the blood-brain barrier, the delicate filtration system that protects the brain from harmful substances in the bloodstream. In moments of intense neural activity, astrocytes respond by increasing blood flow to the busy regions, ensuring that the energy demands of thought and movement are met. They are, in essence, the caretakers of the neural city, providing stability and sustenance while quietly shaping its rhythms. Another vital class of glial cells are the oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system and the Schwann cells in the peripheral nerves. These are the architects of the myelin sheath, the insulating layer that wraps around axons, swiftly and efficiently. Like careful craftsmen, oligodendrocytes extend their processes to multiple axons, forming the segments of myelin that make rapid communication possible. Without them, the brain's signals would crawl instead of race, and coordination would falter. Schwann cells perform a similar role outside the brain and spinal cord, wrapping themselves around peripheral nerves in tight spirals of protection. Both cell types also play a part in repair, guiding regenerating axons when damage occurs. Though they work in silence, their contribution is immense. They are the unseen engineers of speed and precision in the nervous system's design. A third type of glial cell, the microglia, serves as the immune defense of the brain. The nervous system, unlike other parts of the body, is largely isolated from the bloodstream. Most immune cells cannot pass the blood-brain barrier, leaving the brain to care for itself. Microglia take on this responsibility. They move through the neural tissue like vigilant sentinels, constantly scanning for signs of damage, infection, or debris. When they detect trouble, they transform, extending their processes to engulf and digest harmful materials through a process called phagocytosis. They clear away dead cells, prune unused synapses, and release molecules that guide repair. In this way, microglia maintain the brain's cleanliness and balance. Yet their activity must be carefully controlled, for when overactivated, they can contribute to inflammation, leading to conditions such as neurodegeneration. Balance, once again, is the key. Beyond their individual roles, glial cells also communicate with each other and with neurons, forming a second, slower network of signaling. Astrocytes release molecules that influence synaptic transmission, modulating how neurons communicate. They can strengthen or weaken synapses, guiding the process of learning and memory. Through waves of calcium ions that ripple across their membranes, astrocytes send signals to nearby neurons and glia, coordinating activity across local networks. It is as if beneath the rapid firing of neurons exists a deeper, slower rhythm, a background pulse of care, repair, and support that gives the nervous system its enduring stability. During development, glial cells act as guides, leading young neurons to their proper destinations. They form scaffolding across which neurons migrate, shaping the architecture of the brain. Later in life, they continue to refine this architecture, helping to remove unnecessary connections and support the formation of new ones. When an injury occurs, it is glial cells that respond first, rushing to the site to seal damage, remove debris, and create a protective barrier against further harm. This response, known as gliosis, can both help and hinder healing, a reminder of how delicately balanced the brain's maintenance must be. Glial cells also help synchronize the brain's activity on a grand scale. Through their interactions with blood vessels, they regulate the supply of oxygen and glucose, ensuring that active regions receive the energy they need. They participate in the recycling of neurotransmitters, preventing overstimulation, and maintaining the calm flow of communication. Even the timing of sleep is influenced by glial cells, which help clear metabolic waste from the brain during rest. Recent research has revealed a system known as the glymphatic pathway, a network guided by glial cells that flushes out toxins while we sleep. This nightly cleansing helps preserve clarity of thought and memory, suggesting that rest itself is partly the work of glia, washing the mind clean for the new day. In their quiet way, glial cells reveal a truth about the nature of the nervous system, that it is not sustained by speed alone, but by cooperation and care. Neurons carry messages with lightning precision, but it is the glial network that nurtures and maintains them, ensuring that every signal finds its way safely through the labyrinth of the brain. The partnership between neurons and glia is one of balance, activity, and restoration, communication and protection, brilliance and endurance. The neurons may compose the song of thought, but the glia keep the instrument in tune. The importance of this partnership becomes especially evident when it falters. Diseases that affect glial cells can have profound consequences. When oligodendrocytes are damaged, as in multiple sclerosis, the loss of myelin slows or halts the transmission of nerve impulses. When microglia become overactive, chronic inflammation can develop, contributing to conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Even disruptions in astrocytic function can disturb the chemical balance of the brain, leading to seizures or mood disorders. These vulnerabilities remind us that the health of the mind depends not only on the activity of neurons, but on the steadfast work of their supporting cells. Yet glial cells are also agents of renewal. Their ability to divide and replace themselves gives the brain a quiet resilience. Where neurons are often permanent, glial cells can multiply, adapt, and repair. This regenerative quality allows the nervous system to recover from minor injuries and adapt to change. It also suggests that glia may hold the key to future therapies for neurodegenerative diseases, perhaps one day guiding the regeneration of damaged neural tissue or restoring lost function. In their silence, glial cells perform an ancient, essential task. They sustain life. They are the caretakers of the mind, the guardians of the neural universe. Without them, the brilliance of the neurons would flicker and fade. The glial network is the invisible foundation upon which thought stands, a structure of care and balance, as steady and constant as the heartbeat it helps sustain. If the neurons are the stars of the brain, glial cells are the space between them, unseen but indispensable, shaping the cosmos of consciousness from within. They remind us that even in the most active systems, harmony depends on stillness, and strength depends on support. As the mind drifts into rest, the glia continue their patient labor, clearing, nourishing. Their work never stops, yet it makes possible the moments of awareness, creativity, and peace that define our experience of being alive. 15. The harmony of the nervous system. When viewed as a whole, the nervous system reveals itself not as a collection of isolated parts, but as a living symphony, a vast, coordinated harmony of signals, rhythms, and connections. Each neuron, each glial cell, each network and pathway contributes to a balance so intricate that it seems almost musical in nature. The body, through this system, becomes a single, unified being, aware of itself and its surroundings, responsive to the world in ways that feel seamless. From the faintest whisper of a thought to the most powerful surge of motion, everything flows through this exquisite harmony. It is the music of life itself, carried in waves of electricity and chemistry, sustained by balance, rhythm, and care. The nervous system extends from the quiet core of the brain through the spinal cord, branching into every part of the body. It forms a single, organism-wide communication network, a living tapestry of impulses that weave through every organ, every muscle, every sense. The central nervous system, with the brain as its conductor, orchestrates perception, reasoning, and voluntary movement. The peripheral nervous system carries these commands outward and brings sensations inward, creating the circle of awareness that defines consciousness. Together, they maintain the delicate interplay between the inner world of thought and the outer world of experience. At the center of this harmony lies balance, the principle that allows all systems to coexist in steady equilibrium. The brain and spinal cord receive and interpret a constant stream of information: pressure, temperature, light, sound, and countless other signals. Yet, rather than being overwhelmed, the nervous system filters, prioritizes, and integrates these inputs. It amplifies what matters and softens what does not. This modulation allows awareness to remain clear and focused. It is why the sudden sound of a bird in a quiet forest can command attention, while the steady hum of everyday life fades softly into the background. The nervous system is not merely reactive, it is selective, ensuring that consciousness remains both stable and adaptable. Within the brain, this balance is maintained through the continuous interplay of excitation and inhibition. Excitatory neurons drive activity forward, creating the spark of thought, while inhibitory neurons modulate and restrain it, ensuring that the mind does not descend into chaos. The balance between these forces gives rise to rhythm, gentle oscillations that coordinate the flow of signals across regions. These oscillations are the brain's music, its inner pulse. Slow waves accompany sleep, restoring the body and integrating memories. Faster waves appear during wakefulness, guiding perception, movement, and intention. At all times, the brain maintains these rhythms effortlessly, adjusting their tempo as the mind shifts between focus, rest, and dream. This internal harmony extends outward into the body through the autonomic nervous system, which regulates the functions that sustain life without conscious effort. It governs the heartbeat, breathing, digestion, and temperature systems that operate continuously and precisely. Within it, two complementary branches maintain equilibrium: the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic branch prepares the body for activity, sharpening the senses and quickening the pulse when energy is needed. The parasympathetic branch restores calm, slowing the heart and deepening the breath. Together, they maintain the rhythm of wakefulness and rest, effort and recovery. This balance is not static but fluid, adjusting to the needs of each moment, allowing the body to remain alert when required and peaceful when safe. The harmony of the nervous system also relies on communication between its many levels. Signals travel upward from the senses to the brain, and downward from the brain to the body in a continuous loop of feedback. When the hand touches something cold, sensory neurons carry the message upward. The brain interprets it, and motor neurons respond, perhaps drawing the hand away or adjusting grip. This seamless exchange between perception and action creates the experience of unity, the sense that the body and mind move as one. Every function within this system supports the others. The glial cells nourish and protect the neurons, maintaining their environment so that signals flow smoothly. The neurons, in turn, carry information that allows glia to regulate the body's internal landscape. The chemical and electrical processes within each cell mirror the larger balance between excitation and calm, tension and release. It is as if the nervous system reflects, at every level, the same fundamental principle: that life thrives in harmony. This harmony, however, is dynamic. It must constantly adapt. The nervous system is not a machine with fixed circuits. It is a living network that learns, remembers, and transforms. With each experience, new connections form or strengthen, while others fade. The brain's plasticity ensures that balance is not static but responsive. When new challenges arise, the system reorganizes itself, creating fresh pathways that sustain function and growth. In this adaptability lies resilience, the ability to maintain coherence even amid change. The sensory and motor systems provide another layer of harmony, linking perception and motion in continuous feedback. As we move through the world, the senses guide our actions, and our actions shape what we perceive. The brain integrates this flow so smoothly that we rarely notice it, eyes adjusting before the hand reaches, muscles anticipating the next step before the foot touches the ground. These micro-adjustments, occurring in fractions of a second, are what allow movement to feel natural and fluid. It is a conversation without pause, a dialogue between awareness and action that keeps us balanced in every moment. Even emotions, often felt as tides rising and falling within us, are part of this neural symphony. They are not interruptions of reason, but expressions of the same system that governs thought and perception. Emotional signals arise from the limbic system and interact with the prefrontal cortex, where reasoning occurs. The result is a delicate equilibrium between feeling and control, intuition and reflection. When this balance is maintained, emotion guides thought gently, coloring perception with meaning. When disrupted, the harmony falters, and the rhythms of mood can become uneven. Thus, mental peace is not the absence of emotion, but its integration, the alignment of inner currents into a single, coherent flow. The harmony of the nervous system extends even into its moments of rest. During sleep, activity slows but does not cease. The brain cycles through phases, each with its distinct rhythm. In deep sleep, slow waves wash over the cortex, restoring balance and allowing the body to repair. In dreaming, bursts of activity light up the brain, replaying memories and refining neural pathways. These nightly rhythms are as essential to life as the waking ones, maintaining the system's delicate order. The quiet of sleep is not silence. It is the softer movement of the same music, played in a lower key. When harmony is lost, when communication falters or balance breaks, the effects are felt throughout the system of movement, mood, or perception, often reflect disruptions in this equilibrium. Too much excitation may lead to seizures or anxiety. Too much inhibition can bring fatigue or depression. Yet even in these imbalances, the nervous system seeks to restore itself. It adjusts neurotransmitter levels, repairs connections, and rewires pathways to regain its steady rhythm. Healing, in many ways, is the restoration of harmony, the gradual return of balance to the body's internal song. To understand the nervous system is to see that life itself is a composition of rhythm and response. Every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of awareness emerges from the coordinated activity of countless cells working together in silence. The brain and body are not separate entities, but voices in the same orchestra, guided by the same invisible tempo. This harmony sustains thought, movement, emotion, and rest, weaving them into a single experience of being. In moments of stillness, when the world seems to quiet, this harmony continues within. Neurons fire softly in the dark, glial cells maintain their patient care, and the body's rhythms flow as they always have. The nervous system, in all its complexity, remains steady, a vast, living instrument playing the timeless music of existence. And as we drift into sleep, that music continues, serene and unbroken, carrying the gentle pulse of life onward through the night. 16. The resting mind and the night cycle. As daylight fades and the rhythms of the world begin to slow, beneath the stillness of the body, the brain continues to hum with quiet purpose. It does not sleep as we understand it. Rather, it changes its rhythm, shifting from the rapid frequencies of alertness to the slow, sweeping waves of restoration. This nightly transformation is the mind's renewal, a return to balance, a gentle cleansing of thought and memory, and a resetting of the intricate electrical and chemical symphony that sustains awareness. The resting mind is not inactive but deeply alive, performing its most vital work in silence. When the body grows tired and the senses withdraw, the brain begins to alter its state. The neurons that maintain wakefulness gradually reduce their activity, guided by a delicate interplay of chemicals such as adenosine, melatonin, and GABA. Adenosine accumulates in the brain during the day as a byproduct of energy use, signaling fatigue. As its levels rise, alertness wanes, and the body begins to crave rest. In response to darkness, the pineal gland releases melatonin, the hormone of night, which calms the nervous system and prepares the body for sleep. GABA, the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter, deepens this calm, quieting the chatter of neurons and allowing consciousness to drift inward. As the mind slips into sleep, its electrical patterns change dramatically. The fast, irregular waves of wakefulness, known as beta and gamma rhythms, give way to the slower, steadier alpha waves of relaxation, and then to the deep, rolling theta and delta waves of sleep. These slow oscillations ripple across the cortex like gentle tides, synchronizing billions of neurons into harmonious rhythm. This is the architecture of sleep, a cycle divided into distinct stages that repeat several times throughout the night. The first stage is light sleep, a threshold between waking and dreaming. In this stage, muscle activity decreases, heart rate slows, and sensory awareness begins to fade. The brain remains easily aroused, still half listening to the world beyond. A sudden sound or touch can awaken it, for it has not yet sunk into the deeper waters of rest. This light sleep is followed by a second stage, where consciousness slips further away. Bursts of electrical activity called sleep spindles appear, along with rhythmic K-complexes, protective patterns that shield the brain from disruption and help consolidate memory. It is here that the mind begins its nightly repair, gathering fragments of the day and sorting them quietly into order. The third stage brings deep sleep, also known as slow-wave sleep. In this state, the brain's electrical activity slows to its most peaceful rhythm. The delta waves that emerge are long and high, each one representing vast regions of neurons firing in perfect synchrony. During this stage, the body is almost entirely still, muscles relaxed, breathing slow and steady. Growth hormone is released, tissue is repaired, and energy is restored. The immune system strengthens, and the glial cells that maintain the brain's health increase their activity. Through the glymphatic system, waste products that accumulate during wakefulness are cleared away, leaving the brain refreshed for the next day. This is the body's deep repair, a nightly cleansing as silent and essential as breath itself. After deep sleep, the brain transitions into a state unlike any other, rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. Here, the electrical patterns become lively again, resembling those of wakefulness. The eyes dart behind closed lids, muscles twitch faintly, and the mind begins to dream. It is during REM sleep that the brain replays and reimagines the experiences of the day, weaving them into vivid stories that merge memory and imagination. Dreams serve many purposes: emotional regulation, creative synthesis, and memory consolidation among them. They allow the brain to explore possibilities, to process emotions too subtle or complex for waking thought. The dreaming mind, though free from physical movement, is active in ways that shape the very essence of who we are. Throughout the night, the brain cycles through these stages: light sleep, deep sleep, REM, repeating the sequence 4 to 6 times. Early in the night, deep sleep dominates, restoring the body. Toward morning, REM sleep lengthens, nourishing the mind. Between rest and dreaming ensures that both body and consciousness remain in harmony. When sleep is deep and undisturbed, we awaken refreshed, our thoughts clear, our senses calm. When it is disrupted, the nervous system loses its balance. Memory falters, emotions grow unstable, and the body weakens. Sleep is not an escape from life's activity. It is the foundation that sustains it. Even in rest, the nervous system remains watchful. The brainstem, where ancient reflexes reside, continues to regulate the heartbeat, breathing, and temperature. The autonomic nervous system maintains its delicate balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic tones. The heart continues its gentle rhythm. The lungs rise and fall in time with it. And deep within the brain, slow oscillations of energy ripple like quiet waves on an unseen shore. These rhythms synchronize with the body's internal clock. Biological processes, digestion, hormone release, and cellular repair. The circadian rhythm, anchored by a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, responds to light and darkness. During the day, light entering the eyes signals wakefulness, suppressing melatonin and increasing alertness. As night falls, darkness reverses this pattern, inviting rest. This rhythm, shaped by the turning of the earth, has guided life for millions of years. It is the thread that links all living things to the cycles of day and night, of activity and renewal. When this rhythm is disrupted by sleeplessness, artificial light, or stress, the harmony of the nervous system falters. The balance between energy and restoration depends on alignment with this natural flow. While the body rests, the mind continues its quiet work. Memories are sifted and organized, important information is preserved, and unnecessary details fade. Neural connections that have been strengthened by learning during the day are stabilized, while others are gently pruned. This process refines the architecture of thought, ensuring that knowledge and skill become more precise with time. Emotional memories, too, are processed during sleep, their intensity softened, their meanings integrated into the broader fabric of experience. Dreams, in this way, act as the mind's gentle, balancing, reshaping emotion into understanding. The resting mind is not only restorative but creative. Many insights arise after sleep, as if the subconscious mind has continued to think in silence. Artists, scientists, and philosophers alike have found that sleep reveals connections unseen in wakefulness. The dreaming brain explores without constraint, forming associations that defy logic yet hold truth. Beneath the surface of consciousness, the neurons continue to fire in delicate patterns, testing new configurations, seeking harmony in the chaos of experience. When we awaken, the results of this nocturnal exploration emerge as clarity, a solution, an idea, a renewed sense of peace. Glial cells, the caretakers of the nervous system, play an especially active role at night. As the brain's activity slows, they expand slightly, increasing the flow of cerebrospinal fluid between neurons. This flushes away metabolic waste, fragments of proteins and molecules that accumulate during the day's constant firing. In this nightly cleansing, the glial network ensures that the neurons awaken refreshed, free of the residue that can dull perception. The process is invisible and silent, yet without it, thought itself would grow clouded. When morning arrives and light touches the eyelids, the brain begins its gradual return to wakefulness. The pineal gland slows its release of melatonin, and the levels of cortisol rise gently, preparing the body for activity. Neurons begin to fire in faster rhythms. Waking is delicate, a reawakening not only of thought but of the entire network of body and mind. In that quiet moment before full alertness, the remnants of dreams linger, blending imagination and reality for a few brief breaths. The resting mind and the night cycle are not separate from the day, but its complement. Together, they form the two halves of life's rhythm, activity and restoration, consciousness and renewal. The nervous system thrives on this balance, its harmony dependent on the alternation of energy and rest. In sleep, the mind heals. In wakefulness, it creates. Each depends on the other, and so, as the body lies still in the darkness, the brain continues its quiet work, repairing, dreaming, cleansing, and preparing for another dawn. The night is not absence, but transformation, a time when the mind turns inward to maintain its fragile equilibrium. It is in this stillness that the nervous system regains its strength, ensuring that, when we awaken, the symphony of the body and mind continues steady, clear, and beautifully alive. 17. Memory, learning, and the neural trace. Within the silent depths of the brain lies one of its most extraordinary powers, the ability to remember, to learn, and to weave the passage of time into experience. Every sensation, every word, every movement leaves a faint imprint, a neural trace written into the living fabric of the mind. These traces, subtle and fleeting at first, grow stronger through repetition, becoming the threads from which identity, knowledge, and understanding are formed. The act of learning is the process of shaping the brain itself. Memory is the enduring echo of that transformation. Together, they form the foundation of consciousness, the continuity that allows us to know who we are and what the world means. The creation of a memory begins with perception. When we encounter something new, a sound, a face, a fragment of language, sensory neurons send signals into the brain's cortical regions, where the information is interpreted and given context. If the moment is significant, emotionally charged, or repeated often enough, it is passed deeper into the brain's inner structures for storage. The hippocampus, a curved formation nestled within the temporal lobes, plays a central role in this process. Acting as a kind of librarian, it organizes and indexes experiences, determining what should be preserved and what may fade. While short-term impressions flicker briefly in the cortex, it is the hippocampus that converts them into lasting memories, arranging them within the vast library of the mind. This conversion, known as memory consolidation, depends on the strengthening of synaptic connections between neurons. When a network of neurons fires together repeatedly, the efficiency of their communication increases. This process, called long-term potentiation, allows signals to pass more easily along familiar pathways. It is the biological essence of learning, the physical manifestation of repetition and attention. Each time we recall a fact, perform a skill, or relive a memory, we reinforce the pathways that sustain it. In this way, memory is not a static storage but a living pattern, maintained through continual use. There are many kinds of memory, each with its own network of pathways. Sensory memory holds impressions for only a moment, the brief afterimage of a light, the lingering echo of a sound. Short-term memory retains information for seconds or minutes, allowing the mind to hold a phone number, a sentence, or a thought in focus. Long-term memory, by contrast, can last for years or even a lifetime. Within it, we find declarative memories, facts and events we can recall consciously, and procedural memories, which govern skills and habits that we perform without thinking. Declarative memory itself divides further into episodic memory, the recollection of personal experiences, and semantic memory, the storehouse of general knowledge. Each type depends on its own network, interwoven yet distinct, supported by countless interactions between the hippocampus, the cortex, and other regions of the brain. Emotions play a powerful role in determining what is remembered. The amygdala, an almond-shaped structure deep within the brain, acts as a guardian of emotional memory. When an event carries strong feeling, fear, joy, surprise, or sorrow, the amygdala heightens the activity of the hippocampus, ensuring that the experience is firmly recorded. This mechanism, shaped by evolution, helps the mind remember what is important for survival. Yet it also explains why emotional memories can be so vivid and why they sometimes persist long after we wish them to fade. The same system that helps us learn from joy and danger can also hold on to pain. In this way, memory becomes both a gift and a burden, a reflection of life's beauty and its weight. The process of recalling a memory is as dynamic as its creation. When we remember, the brain does not retrieve a stored image like a photograph. Instead, it reconstructs the experience by reactivating the pattern of neural activity that first created it. Each act of remembering strengthens that pattern, but it can also alter it, blending new details with old. Memory, therefore, is both stable and flexible, a story rewritten each time it is told. This malleability allows for creativity and learning, but also explains why memories can change, why recollection is colored by emotion, imagination, and time. The neural trace, though enduring, is not carved in stone. It is a living impression, shaped by the present as much as by the past. Learning, in its essence, is the continual refinement of these neural traces. Every new skill, language, or idea creates a network of connections that grow stronger with practice. When we first learn to play a note on an instrument, to balance on a bicycle, or to speak a new word, the brain recruits neurons across multiple regions: sensory, motor, emotional, and cognitive, to coordinate the effort. At first, the process feels uncertain and slow, as the connections are weak and unrefined. But with repetition, the neural pathways become more efficient. Unnecessary activity fades, signals travel more smoothly, and the action becomes effortless. What was once conscious becomes automatic. What was once learned becomes instinct. This transformation from effort to ease is the hallmark of mastery, and it is written directly into the architecture of the brain. The plasticity that supports learning continues throughout life. Even in adulthood, the brain remains capable of forming new connections and modifying old ones. The principle of neuroplasticity, once thought to end with childhood, is now known to persist across the lifespan. Every new experience, every act of curiosity or practice leaves its mark. The neural map is redrawn constantly, reflecting not only what we know, but who we are becoming. In this sense, learning is not a separate activity, but the natural expression of life itself, the brain's way of growing through time. Sleep plays a vital role in the preservation of memory. During the deep and dream-filled hours of night, the brain replays patterns of neural activity from the day, strengthening important connections and pruning away what is no longer needed. The hippocampus communicates with the cortex in slow, rhythmic bursts, transferring memories from short-term storage into long-term stability. This nocturnal conversation ensures that learning becomes lasting. Without sufficient rest, this process falters, and memories remain fragile, easily lost. The resting mind, far from being idle, performs the essential work of integration, weaving the day's fragments into the durable tapestry of knowledge. In some ways, memory is less a record than a rhythm, a repeating pattern of activation that carries the essence of experience forward through time. It links the past with the present and gives meaning to the future. Through memory, the brain constructs continuity, allowing us to feel that the person who awakens each morning is the same one who fell asleep the night before. Yet the brain is always changing, its networks subtly altered by every thought and sensation. The paradox of memory is that it creates identity out of impermanence. We remain ourselves not because we are unchanging, but because we change in patterns that persist. Forgetting is not failure. It is part of the balance that sustains the mind. To remember everything would be to drown in detail. Forgetting allows the brain to release what no longer serves, to make room for the new. Just as a forest renews itself by shedding leaves, The mind renews itself through forgetting. The neural traces that are not revisited gradually weaken, their pathways dissolved back into the larger network, freeing energy for growth. In this quiet erosion lies clarity, the ability to focus on what matters. Every act of memory is a conversation between neurons, a ripple of energy that passes through circuits, strengthened by time. In these ripples lie the stories of our lives, the faces we have loved, the words we have spoken, the paths we have walked. The neural trace of each moment endures, however faintly, in the gentle hum of electrical and chemical patterns that define the brain's living landscape. And though no memory remains untouched by time, together they form the essence of being a continuous flow of experience and understanding. In the end, memory and learning are not separate functions of the nervous system, but its very nature. The brain learns because it lives, and it remembers because it must carry life forward. Every connection, every trace, every gentle reinforcement of pattern ensures that we are not confined to a single moment, but can stretch across time, reflecting, adapting, and growing. In the quiet interplay of neurons and synapses, of chemical messengers and electrical waves, the story of who we are is written, not once, but again and again, endlessly renewed by the act of living. 18. The nervous system in balance. The human nervous system is a masterpiece of equilibrium, a living instrument that maintains balance across the endless currents of activity within the body and mind. It is not a system of extremes, but of harmony, poised delicately between motion and stillness, energy and calm, stimulation and rest. Every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of thought or emotion is shaped by this subtle balancing act. The body depends on it for health, the mind for clarity, and consciousness for continuity. Within its ceaseless motion, the nervous system finds serenity, a steady rhythm that holds all of life's variations within the soft boundaries of equilibrium. This balance begins with the division that lies at the core of the nervous system's design, the complementary partnership between its sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. These two arms of the autonomic system work not in opposition, but in cooperation, alternating like the inhale and exhale of a single breath. The sympathetic branch is the body's accelerator. It awakens, mobilizes, and prepares for action. When the senses detect, challenge, or need, it raises the heart rate, sharpens attention, and quickens the pulse. Energy flows outward, the muscles tense in readiness. In contrast, the parasympathetic branch is the body's brake, returning calm after activity. It slows the heartbeat, deepens the breath, and restores digestion. Energy turns inward. The body repairs and renews. Between these two rhythms lies life itself, the rise and fall of vitality, the graceful movement from alertness to repose. The balance of these systems is maintained through constant communication between the brain and the body. Deep within the brainstem, regions such as the medulla and pons monitor the state of the organs through streams of sensory information. They measure blood pressure, oxygen levels, and temperature, adjusting the output of the autonomic system in response. Higher centers, such as the hypothalamus, oversee these processes, ensuring that internal conditions remain stable. This internal stability, known as homeostasis, is the foundation upon which all other functions rest. Without it, thought would falter, muscles would weaken, and perception would lose clarity. The nervous system is not only an instrument of action, but a guardian of inner harmony. Even emotions are regulated through this same balance. The amygdala, which responds to threats and drives the sympathetic response, communicates with the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reasoning and reflection. When harmony exists between them, emotion and logic act together, guiding behavior with wisdom and sensitivity. When balance is lost, emotions may overwhelm thought, or thought may suppress feeling, leading to restlessness or apathy. The body reflects this imbalance immediately through tension, fatigue, or irregular rhythm. Thus, The equilibrium of the nervous system is both physical and emotional, linking the heartbeat to the flow of feeling, the breath to the state of mind. The breath itself is one of the most direct expressions of this balance. It bridges the voluntary and involuntary, a function that can be both automatic and controlled. Each inhale activates the sympathetic system, subtly increasing alertness and heart rate, while each exhale engages the parasympathetic, inducing calm. This simple alternation reflects the larger harmony of the nervous system, where every act of expansion is balanced by one of release. Through mindful breathing, this balance can be consciously influenced. Slow, steady breaths calm the mind by stimulating the parasympathetic pathways, reducing the release of stress hormones, and restoring the body's rhythm to its natural flow. In this way, breath becomes both a reflection of and a gateway to inner balance. The balance of the nervous system is not static but adaptive. It responds to the world with sensitivity, adjusting to meet each moment's demands. When danger appears, the sympathetic system surges to prepare for flight or defense. When safety returns, the parasympathetic system restores calm. In modern life, however, this natural rhythm is often disrupted. Prolonged stress can keep the sympathetic system engaged for too long, leading to tension, fatigue, and imbalance. The body remains ready for action even in moments of rest, and the mind finds no stillness. Over time, this imbalance can erode the harmony of the nervous system, contributing to anxiety, sleeplessness, and illness. Yet even in these times of strain, the body's innate intelligence seeks equilibrium. Through rest, reflection, and mindful awareness, the nervous system slowly restores itself, recalibrating toward peace. Sleep plays a crucial role in maintaining this balance. During rest, the parasympathetic system dominates, allowing the body to recover from the demands of the day. The heart slows, muscles relax, and the brain clears away the metabolic byproducts of activity. The cycles of deep sleep and dreaming gently reset the balance between excitation and inhibition, ensuring that the mind remains clear and resilient. Without sufficient rest, the balance tilts toward overstimulation, and the system becomes strained. The nervous system, like all living systems, depends on rhythm, periods of activity followed by renewal, tension followed by release. Movement, too, supports this harmony. Gentle physical activity engages the sympathetic system in measured bursts, followed by parasympathetic recovery. The alternation strengthens both systems, improving their responsiveness and coordination. Exercise also releases endorphins and other neurotransmitters that stabilize mood and enhance resilience. In contrast, stillness and meditation strengthen the parasympathetic response, training the body to return to calm more quickly after stress. In both movement and rest, the nervous system learns balance through experience. It is not a rigid equilibrium but a living one, flexible and responsive, adapting moment by moment. The harmony of the nervous system extends beyond the individual, linking us to the environment and to others. Social connection, touch, and communication all influence autonomic balance. The simple presence of safety, a kind voice, a familiar face, a sense of belonging activates the parasympathetic pathways that bring calm. This response is rooted in the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and digestive organs. When the vagus nerve is active, heart rate variability increases, a sign of resilience and adaptability. This physiological measure reflects emotional well-being as well, showing how deeply the nervous system intertwines with our sense of connection and peace. When harmony falters, the body signals its distress in subtle ways. Shallow breathing, tense muscles, racing thoughts, or a feeling of detachment. These are not flaws, but messages the nervous system's way of asking for restoration. By listening to these signals and allowing rest, nourishment, and reflection, balance can be regained. The nervous system is inherently self-correcting, Given time and care, it will find its way back to equilibrium. It is guided by rhythms as old as life itself, the beating of the heart, the rise and fall of breath, the alternation of day and night. This balance is mirrored in nature. The nervous system, like the world it inhabits, moves through cycles, growth and decay, tension and ease, waking and sleeping. Just as the ocean alternates between waves and calm, the mind alternates between thought and silence. The body's systems, the smallest cell to the largest organ, follow this same rhythm. Balance, in this sense, is not the absence of change, but its mastery, the ability to move with the flow of life without being swept away by it. In stillness, when the senses quiet and the thoughts slow, the balance of the nervous system becomes perceptible. The heart beats softly, the breath deepens, and a sense of calm spreads through the body. This state is not emptiness but fullness, the natural harmony that arises when all systems align. It is the foundation of health, awareness, and peace. The nervous system, restored to balance, becomes like a clear mirror, reflecting the world without distortion. In every moment, this balance is maintained through countless invisible adjustments, a continuous conversation between the cells, organs, and networks of the body. It is an ancient rhythm, older than thought, older even than the species itself, the quiet intelligence of life, maintaining its own harmony. When we rest, breathe, and listen inwardly, we can feel its pulse gentle, steady, and enduring. It is the soundless heartbeat of the nervous system in balance, the inner music that sustains the living world. 19 disorders and disruptions of neural function. The human nervous system, though resilient and beautifully balanced, is also delicate. Its harmony can be disturbed by illness, injury, or imbalance. And when this happens, the effects reach every level of existence, from the body's physical coordination to the quiet rhythms of thought and emotion. The same intricate connectivity that allows for consciousness and movement can also make the system vulnerable. A single disruption in communication, a failure of chemistry or structure, can ripple outward, altering the harmony of the entire being. To understand the nervous system's fragility is not to see it as weak, but to recognize the extraordinary precision required to sustain its function. Even in its disorders, the nervous system reveals its complexity, showing how deeply every part of life is interwoven. At its most basic level, neural dysfunction begins when the communication between neurons is disrupted. A neuron depends on the careful exchange of electrical impulses and neurotransmitters to pass messages along its network. When this exchange falters, whether through damage to the axon, imbalance of chemicals, or loss of myelin insulation, signals may weaken, distort, or fail entirely. Such interruptions can arise from many causes: genetic variation, injury, infection, metabolic imbalance, or the gradual wear of time. The result is as varied as the functions of the neurons themselves. In one person, the disruption might manifest as tremors or paralysis; in another, as confusion, memory loss, or emotional instability. Each symptom is the visible trace of invisible change. One of the best-known examples of disrupted neural communication is multiple sclerosis, a condition in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the myelin sheath that insulates axons in the central nervous system. Without this protective covering, electrical impulses slow or become erratic, leading to fatigue, weakness, and loss of coordination. In some cases, vision blurs as the optic nerves are affected. In others, speech or balance deteriorates. The disease unfolds in unpredictable waves, periods of activity followed by remission, mirroring the fragile nature of the myelin itself. Though science continues to search for a cure, treatments that reduce inflammation and support myelin repair have brought new hope, allowing the nervous system's remarkable ability to adapt and recover to shine through even in adversity. Another profound disruption occurs in disorders that affect the motor neurons, such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. In this condition, the neurons that control voluntary muscle movement gradually degenerate, weaken, speech and movement fade, yet sensation and awareness often remain intact. The mind becomes trapped within a body that no longer responds. It is one of the most poignant demonstrations of how essential neural communication is to identity and presence. Despite the severity of such diseases, many individuals living with them display extraordinary resilience, their inner lives undimmed by the loss of motion. The stillness of the body, in these cases, does not silence the mind but reveals its depth. A stroke, for example, occurs when the blood supply to part of the brain is interrupted, depriving neurons of oxygen and nutrients. Within minutes, these cells begin to die, and the networks they form break apart. The effects depend on the region involved. Speech may be lost if the damage occurs in language areas, movement if motor regions are affected, or memory and emotion if the deeper structures are impaired. Yet even here, the brain's plasticity offers a path toward recovery. Neighboring neurons can take on new roles, forming fresh pathways to restore lost function. With time and rehabilitation, the nervous system learns to heal itself, rewiring to compensate for what has been lost. Other disorders originate not in the structure of neurons, but in their chemistry. The brain's balance of neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and others governs mood, attention, and perception. When this balance shifts, the mind's harmony falters. In depression, for instance, levels of serotonin and related chemicals may drop, leading to fatigue, sadness, and loss of motivation. In anxiety, excessive activity in the circuits driven by norepinephrine and cortisol keeps the body in a constant state of alertness, even in safety. In schizophrenia, imbalances in dopamine pathways can blur the boundary between imagination and reality, producing hallucinations and disordered thought. Each condition reflects not a failure of will, but a disruption of chemistry, a reminder that emotion and biology are deeply entwined. Neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's represent another form of disruption, the gradual unraveling of neural networks over time. In Alzheimer's disease, proteins known as amyloid and tau accumulate within the brain, damaging neurons and the connections between them. The result is memory loss, confusion, and the erosion of identity itself. The neural pathways that once carried the stories of a lifetime begin to fade, leaving the individual adrift between moments of clarity and forgetfulness. In Parkinson's disease, the neurons of the substantia nigra, a region that produces dopamine, degenerate, leading to tremors, stiffness, and difficulty with movement. Yet even as the body falters, many people with these conditions retain deep emotional and intellectual insight, support their expression weaken. Injury to the nervous system, whether through trauma or infection, can also disturb its function. Damage to the spinal cord may sever the communication between brain and body, resulting in paralysis below the site of injury. Head trauma can disrupt the delicate balance of the brain's electrical activity, leading to memory loss or personality change. Even mild concussions can cause temporary confusion as neurons reset their electrical gradients. Infections that cross the blood-brain barrier, such as meningitis or encephalitis, can inflame neural tissue, creating widespread disarray in communication. Each of these injuries challenges the nervous system's integrity, yet its response is often one of adaptation, as it seeks to reorganize and find new ways to sustain function. There are also disorders that affect the rhythm of neural activity rather than its structure. Epilepsy, for instance, arises from sudden, synchronized bursts of electrical firing across networks of neurons. These waves of activity disrupt normal communication, producing seizures that vary from subtle lapses in awareness to full-body convulsions. The condition reflects an imbalance between excitation and inhibition, the same balance that normally allows the brain to function smoothly. Treatments aim to restore that balance, calming excessive activity and stabilizing the neural landscape. In this way, epilepsy illustrates the nervous system's dual nature, its immense power and its need for harmony. Despite the variety of these disorders, they all share a common theme: the disruption of communication, whether through loss of structure, imbalance of chemistry, or disturbance of rhythm. The unity of the nervous system depends on connection. When that connection falters, the results may be visible in the body or hidden in the mind. But always they reflect the same principle: the delicate interdependence of all parts of the system. The restoration of health, therefore, lies not only in addressing symptoms, but in re-establishing connection between neurons, between body and mind, between person and world. Science continues to deepen our understanding of these conditions. Advances in neurobiology, genetics, and regenerative medicine point toward treatments that may one day restore lost functions, repairing myelin, replacing neurons, or rebalancing neurotransmitters with precision. Already, therapies that harness neuroplasticity, such as targeted rehabilitation, mindfulness, and deep brain stimulation, are helping to reawaken the brain's capacity for adaptation. Even where cure is not yet possible, understanding brings comfort, a recognition of the extraordinary system at work within us, striving always for equilibrium. In the end, the disorders of the nervous system reveal its essence. They remind us that the harmony of life is not static, but dynamic, sustained through constant renewal. Every imbalance invites restoration. Every loss opens the possibility of adaptation. The nervous system, though vulnerable, possesses an enduring strength, a quiet determination to preserve connection and coherence even in adversity. Within its struggles and recoveries, we see a reflection of the human condition itself, fragile yet resilient, complex yet unified, always seeking balance amid the flux of change. 20. The endless network, the brain's connection to the universe. Within the quiet boundaries of the skull lies a universe, a vast and luminous network of living matter, pulsing with electricity and thought. Each neuron fires like a star in a cosmic expanse. Though it weighs little more than a handful of Earth, the human brain contains more links than there are stars in the Milky Way, more patterns of energy than there are grains of sand upon the shores of the planet. In its complexity, it mirrors the structure of the cosmos itself. To contemplate the brain is to glimpse the universe reflected inward, an endless network of motion, harmony, and mystery, alive within us as it is beyond us. Every atom that forms a neuron, every molecule that carries a signal, was once part of a star. Long before life arose, these particles were forged in the heat of ancient suns and scattered across space. In time, they became part of the earth, of the air and water, of the living forms that evolved upon its surface. The brain, in its intricate construction, is thus made from the same material as the stars, the same dust that shines in distant galaxies. The energy that flows through its networks is a continuation of the same cosmic forces that shape the heavens. To think, to dream, to remember, is to participate in the ongoing story of the universe's unfolding. The nervous system, with its endless circuits of communication, movement, structure within change. Just as galaxies form and dissolve according to invisible laws, neurons connect and disconnect, forming new patterns in response to experience. Both systems rely on energy flowing through networks, and both are guided by rhythm and repetition. The pulse of electrical impulses traveling through axons is not unlike the waves of radiation that ripple through space. The oscillations of brain waves echo the gravitational rhythms that bind celestial bodies in their orbits. On every scale, from the microscopic to the galactic, nature speaks in the same language patterns of vibration and connection. Within the brain, This universal pattern takes the form of consciousness, billions of neurons, communicating through trillions of synapses, generate the seamless experience of awareness, the ability to perceive, to reflect, and to imagine. No single neuron holds a thought or memory. Rather, it is the collective pattern that gives rise to mind. This unity, emerging from multiplicity, is a reflection of the same principle that shapes the universe, the whole arising from the interaction of countless parts. Consciousness, in this view, is not an anomaly but a continuation of nature's creative flow, a way for the universe to know itself through living form. When we look upward at the night sky and feel wonder, that wonder is the brain recognizing its own origin. The light from distant stars, traveling across vast distances, enters the eyes and is translated by neural pathways into perception. The brain does not simply receive this light, it gives it meaning. It connects the tiny spark in the sky to the immense reality it represents, bridging incomprehensible distances with a single thought. Through this act of perception, the brain and the cosmos become one continuous system, the observer and the observed intertwined. The neurons that interpret starlight are made of the same elements as the stars themselves, completing a circle of awareness that spans both inner and outer space. This interconnectedness extends beyond the physical into the experiential. The nervous system does not only process the world, it participates in it. Every sensation, every breath, every sound or scent is part of a dialogue between the body and its surroundings. The mind is not confined within the skull. It reaches outward through the senses, engaging with the environment in a continuous exchange of information. The wind brushing against the skin, the rhythm of waves, the pattern of a leaf, all enter the nervous system as signals, shaping perception and emotion. The universe communicates with the brain through these impressions, and the brain responds by forming thoughts, movements, and expressions that alter the world in return. In this sense, the brain is not a separate entity, but a node in a larger network, a living connection point within the web of existence. The electrical energy that flows through neurons mirrors the synapses, flow of energy through ecosystems, weather systems, and galaxies. Just as trees exchange gases with the atmosphere and rivers circulate water through the earth, the brain exchanges information with its environment, maintaining balance through constant interaction. Every thought arises from this interplay, a delicate balance between inner and outer worlds. The nervous system's rhythms also echo the cycles of nature. The daily alternation of wake and sleep mirrors the rotation of the planet and the passage of light and darkness. The body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm, aligns with the sun's movement across the sky. Even the oscillations of brain waves reflect the pulse of life around us, the slow waves of deep sleep resonating with the stillness of night, the rapid bursts of waking thought aligning with the brightness of day. In every rhythm of the nervous system, we find the rhythm of the world itself. At times, this connection can be felt directly, in moments of deep stillness or awe. When the mind becomes quiet, when thoughts slow and awareness widens, the distinction between self and world begins to fade. The nervous system, freed from constant analysis and tension, aligns with the larger patterns of nature. The heartbeat matches the rhythm of breathing, the breath flows in time with the surrounding sounds, and for a brief moment, the boundaries of the self dissolve. This state, often described in meditation, art, or the contemplation of nature, is the nervous system's deepest harmony, the recognition that it is not separate from the universe but an expression of it. Science, too, reflects this connection. The same mathematical patterns that describe neural networks also describe the distribution of galaxies, the flow of rivers, and the formation of clouds. The branching of dendrites within the brain resembles the branching of trees or lightning, each following the most efficient path for communication and energy. The fractal geometry of the nervous system mirrors the architecture of the cosmos, complexity arising from simplicity, order emerging from chaos. In these parallels, we see that the universe and the brain are not opposites but companions. In its search for meaning, the human mind often turns outward to the stars, yet the same mystery lies within. The brain, through its networks and rhythms, contains a reflection of the cosmos, a miniature universe of motion and light. Every moment of awareness is a continuation of the same creative process that forged galaxies and stars. The impulse to explore, to understand, to dream, arises from this shared essence. The brain's curiosity about the universe is the universe's curiosity about itself. Even in rest, the connection remains. As we sleep, the brain's activity slows, but its patterns continue, mirroring the gentle cycles of the earth turning in space. Dreams carry echoes of the natural world, skies, oceans, landscapes, as if the mind revisits its origins in the cosmos. In the stillness of sleep, the brain restores its balance, harmonizing again with the rhythms that sustain all life. To see the brain as part of the universe is to recognize the unity of all things, matter and energy, body and mind, self and world. The same forces that move the planets move within us. The same laws that govern stars shape the firing of neurons. Awareness is not a separate phenomenon, but the flowering of universal order into consciousness. Through the nervous system, the universe has learned to perceive itself, to know beauty, to feel time, to wonder at its own existence. In this understanding lies peace. The endless network of the nervous system is not isolated. It is part of the greater network that binds all of creation. Every breath we take, every thought we think, resonates faintly through that vast web. When we rest, when we listen inwardly, we can sense it, the faint pulse of connection, the quiet music of being. It is the same rhythm that moves through the oceans, through the trees, through the stars themselves. The brain is not merely an organ of thought. It is the universe, condensed and alive, gazing upon itself through the mirror of the mind. And as we drift into the silence of sleep, that endless connection continues, a soft current running through the body, linking us to all that is. The neurons continue to whisper their quiet messages. The glial cells continue their care, and the rhythm of the universe continues within. The nervous system, from its first spark to its final breath, remains part of this grand design, a brief, luminous expression of the infinite network from which it arose and to which, in time, it will gently return.